Chapter 477. But this general didn't panic when he saw Hatred's aura. He just stared at the Shen Realm demon carefully, and the Shen Realm demon was also staring at him. After 2 or 3 seconds, Hatred was about to speak with a gloomy face, but the old general suddenly threw away the talisman in his hand. As soon as the talisman fell to the ground, it immediately turned into ashes. The golden light on his body gradually disappeared, and the restriction was gone. The group of demons immediately let out low and ferocious roars. If it wasn't for Hatred, they would have immediately swarmed him. Seeing his action, Hatred's eyebrows slightly relaxed. He slightly raised his hand to stop those demons who were ready to move. "Mortal, you have guts. Who are you?" The old general sat on a rock and cupped his fist to Hatred. "Lord Tongdan, please forgive me for my rudeness. After all, I am old and weak. After walking this part of the mountain road, I have no strength to stand up. I can only rest. I am the Deputy General of the Li Kingdom's floating army, Zhang Jingzhong. This is my identity on the surface. But I also have another identity, which is Mu Nanju, the manager of the Li Kingdom. Lord Tongtian, have you heard of Mu Nanju?" Hatred stared at him suspiciously, thinking for a while. But he didn't answer, only said, "What do you want?" After saying this, he turned his head to look at the sky. From here, he could see a thin black line in the sky. That black line was the black tower of the Shen Gate. He could also see the sun was about to set, and the sunset glow was magnificent, as if the sky was on fire. There was about half an hour before the night completely fell. He turned his head and said, "No matter what you want, I will only give you a quarter of an hour. If you can persuade me to spare your life within a quarter of an hour, you can live one more day. If you can't, I'm afraid you will be torn apart tonight." The group of demons immediately let out a hair-raising howl. But this General Zhang didn't panic, only smiled slightly. "Then Lord Tongdan, please send them away first. The first thing I want to say, maybe Lord Tongtian doesn't want too many people to hear it." Yizi seemed to be a little surprised. He thought for a moment, and a dangerous light flashed in his eyes. "Are you Li Yunxin's man?" General Zhang smiled and shook his head. Hatred was silent for a while, then said in a low voice, "Disperse." It was just 2 words. The hundreds of demons who had followed General Zhang all the way did not hesitate at all. They immediately dispersed without a sound. It was not until they had retreated far away that they started to get noisy again. It was as if there were many people who had enmity with each other in the past. Now that they met again, they did not dare to act rashly in front of Hatred. Only when they were far away did they start fighting amongst themselves again. General Zhang straightened his back and said seriously, "The Lord Tongtian has a good command over his subordinates. But the demons under him were like this. Once they left the Lord Tongtian's sight, they were like a plate of loose sand. Such soldiers were indeed a burden to the Lord Tongtian. Compared to carrying them all the time, sending them to death and turning them into demon power is a wise move." Hatred did not say anything but just listened quietly. But in fact, when General Zhang said doesn't want too many people to hear it, he had already guessed that this might be what he meant. General Zhang said this and said, "As for Mu Nanju, the Lord Tongtian may not have heard of it. But from now on he may hear this name often. I came here to offer a plan to the Lord Tongtian, so that the Lord Tongtian can firmly control the situation in the coming war and be invincible." Hatred snorted and looked at the sky again. "Only half an hour is left." General Zhang smiled again. "I also know that the Lord Tongtian may not want to win a big victory. But how can an arrogant demon like the Lord Tongtian be willing to fail? There are only 2 reasons why he doesn't want to win a big victory. First, it's because the Lord Tongtian needs demon power. Second, the Lord Tongtian knows that he can't win. Compared to the demons, the Shenmen are still much stronger. No matter how good the plan is, there is nothing they can do without the soldiers in their hands. The Lord Tongtian is not a person who is ambitious, so he knows how to accept the reality, he just wants to lose. However, there is one point. Everything must be in the palm of one's hand to make people feel at ease. For example, the matter of winning or losing. Does the Lord Tongtian like to give the initiative to the Shenmen, or to take the initiative in his own hands? If he wants to win, if he wants to lose, then he wants to lose. Is it better than the current situation? Or further? General Zhang paused and raised his finger to point at the black tower in the sky. If he takes the initiative, he can not only break the black tower. We can even chase them all the way to the Tongtian swamp and kill our way to the Cloud Mountain, accomplishing the great feat that no demon has ever accomplished in the past tens of thousands of years. Then, we can think about whether we still need the demon power or the soul. Isn't that even better? What he said was quite tempting. But Hatred just smiled coldly. So you, a mortal, have a way to break the Black Tower? Zhang Zhaozhong also smiled. The Black Tower is a Taoist instrument. It contains two magic weapons. One is a 10-foot black wind mace, and the other is a red pearl. I think the Lord Tongtian has already tested the power of that treasure. It is guarding the way to Tongtian Swamp. Once it is fully activated, it will immediately emit a fatal red light. Even fine steel will be turned into mist in an instant. If the army is released to attack, I'm afraid more than half of them will be lost in an instant. But to cross the Black Tower and go straight to Tongtian Swamp, the limited number of big demons will be weak, and the Taoists will outnumber them. Isn't this what the Lord Tongtian is worried about? Hatred's face finally showed obvious surprise. You, a mortal, even know this. We have many people hiding in Cloud Mountain. We know a lot more than that. Zhang Jingzhong said seriously, Mu Nanju and the Lord Tongtian have a common interest in defeating the Taoists. Hearing this, Yazi pondered for a while and looked at the horizon. Your quarter of an hour is up, he said in a low voice, but you're lucky to survive. You stay here tonight. If you can survive until tomorrow, I will see you again in the morning. After saying this, he didn't stay any longer, turned around and went into the cave. After another quarter of an hour, the sky was completely dark. As a result, in the dark forest around General Zhang, many pairs of eyes that flickered with dim light gradually appeared. But he still didn't panic. He took out the saber from his waist and put it beside his hand. Then he took out the dagger and untied the water bag and the food bag from his waist. While watching the surroundings vigilantly, he ate and drank slowly. There were many pairs of scary eyes in the forest. Some belonged to beasts. Others belonged to demons. But, for the whole night, not a single demon came to disturb him. Zhang Jingzhong knew that no matter why Yazi asked him to stay here for the night, he must have such an idea. He said that the soldiers under the command of Lord of Heaven Reaching didn't listen to his orders. So, he wanted Zhang Jingzhong to see what happened to those demon soldiers and demon generals tonight. Therefore, he knew that this Lord of Tongtian's power and influence among the demons was indeed very strong. Even if he didn't say a word, as long as he didn't order the demons to kill him, none of them dared to move. And so the whole night passed. When Hatred appeared in front of General Zhang again the next day, this old general was already covered with cuts and bruises, and his face was almost covered by blood. Beside him, 15 wolf corpses were scattered around the large blue stone, and there was even a brightly colored tiger with its eyes hanging over it. Hatred raised his eyebrows, but he didn't seem to be in a bad mood. He walked around the old general, then said, "It turns out that you also have some skills. So, what do you want to say to me today?" General Zhang let out a long sigh, wiped his face and sat back on the green stone. He did not complain about his injuries, nor did he mention the attack of the ferocious beasts last night. It was as if the two of them were just having a conversation a moment ago, and now they were talking again. Without any hesitation, he went straight to the point. "Today, I want to tell Lord of Heaven the way to break the Black Tower. With this plan, the Lord Tongtian will be able to break the first line of defense of Xianmen. After that, if the Lord Tongtian wants to lose or want to go further, it's your choice." Hatred nodded. "Go ahead." General Zhang smiled slightly. "To break the Black Tower and the Red Pearl, it's difficult but not very difficult. It's difficult for other demons and cultivators in the world. It's not difficult for dragons. Now there are 9 dragon sun in the Yi country, and 8 of them can move freely. These 8 control 7 parts of the water system in the world. When it comes to moving clouds and rain, even sages can't compare. The plan I'm talking about is wind and rain. And wind and rain to break the Red Pearl above the Black Tower." Hatred was a little surprised. "Wind and rain?" "Exactly," Zhang Jingzhong said in a deep voice. "When the Dragon King works together to move clouds and rain, the power of the Red Pearl will be greatly reduced. Your demon soldiers and demon generals can attack it directly. In the big wind and rain, even high-level cultivators of Xianmen will be affected, not to mention those who can't fly. And choose the time of the surprise attack at night. At that time, people's vision is the weakest, but demons have a natural advantage. If we catch them off guard, we'll definitely succeed." Hatred was stunned for a while and then laughed. "Wind and rain? You ask me, to use wind and rain to deal with the treasure of Xianmen?" After saying this, his face immediately became gloomy. "I'll give you another chance. If you say these ridiculous words again, I'll tear you immediately." The great demon of Xianmen was about to get angry, but General Zhang was not afraid at all. He just looked at Hatred and said in a deep voice, "This is not a joke, it's really a wind and rain." Ordinary wind and rain to deal with ordinary treasure of Shenmen is naturally a joke. But now, it's the 8 dragon sun who work together to make clouds and rain. It's limited to within 1 or 200 miles around the Black Tower. The denser and fiercer the wind and rain, the better the effect. When the rain and fog in the air are thick to a certain extent, in such a large area, the power of the fatal mysterious light of the Black Tower and the Red Pearl will be greatly weakened, even less than 1/10 of before. Although he said it solemnly and sincerely, Hatred's face was still very ugly. General Zhang sighed in a low voice, "The Lord Tong Tian has seen the crystal. Then has the Lord Tongdan ever basked in the sun through the crystal?" After saying this, he put his hand into his bosom, and very carefully took out an object. It was a palm-sized, smooth-polished crystal. He stood up, slowly walked to the front of Hatred and raised the crystal. "Allow me to be bold and ask the Lord Tongtan to try. Put your hand behind this crystal and then in front of it and see if it's cooler behind the crystal." It was the early morning of autumn, and the chill was pressing, so there was no difference between cooler and cooler. But the 5 senses of demons were much more sensitive than ordinary people. Hatred stared at him for a while and then slowly stretched out his hand and put it on top for a while. Then he put it on top for a while. Then he frowned and looked at Zhang Jingzhong. General Zhang put away the crystal and said seriously, "The Lord Tongtian has already felt it. This crystal reduces the heat in the sunlight. The wind and rain do the same to the mysterious light emitted by the Red Pearl. When the rare and dense storm and fog that covers the sky covers all the demon soldiers and demon generals, then the Red Pearl will be no different from a piece of trash. Even the Lord Tongtian, who specializes in summoning clouds and rain, doesn't know about this. How can the people of Shenmen know about it? They will only think that the wind and rain are not a problem. Once they are attacked by us, they will definitely lose." Hatred was silent for a while, as if he began to think carefully about this matter. After a quarter of an hour, he suddenly turned over and went back to the cave without saying a word. General Zhang sat back on the bluestone and began to wait patiently, until another day passed. Yazi reappeared in front of him, grabbed him by the collar and brought him into the crypt. "Tell me more about your Namiju." Chapter 478. Thus, 2 days later, General Zhang Jingzhong, who called himself the Deputy General of the Floating Roaming Army and the Great Shopkeeper of the Southern Wujuli country, stood side by side with Yazi and Zither Monarch on the shoulder of a gigantic golden horn giant centipede. Amidst the raging storm and the blade-like icy mist, they watched as the ferocious demon soldiers swept past the collapsed Black Tower and charged towards heaven-reaching swamp. Su Yusong and Zhuamuja were summoned to the top of Cloud Mountain. The last time the 2 of them appeared in this spacious hall at the summit of Cloud Mountain, the hall was filled with elders who were on duty. However, only one person summoned them this time. It was the golden-haired D that Su Yusong called Grandpa D. Before Su Yusong opened his mouth, Grandpa D's face darkened. He threw a silk scroll on the ground in front of them and asked coldly, "Where is the red bead?" Su Yusong was slightly stunned and looked at Zhuamuja. In fact, it was not that Grandpa D, who was also an elder, spoke in such a superior tone. The 2 of them knew that their so-called elders were just high-level servants in the eyes of others. They were stunned that Grandpa D did not ask about the situation of the battle or the safety of Cloud Mountain, but asked about the red bead first. There were many magic treasures in Taoism. The red bead was relatively useful, but it should not be important to this extent. Thus, after thinking about it, he knew that it was just a pretext. However, he was not in the mood to accompany this elder's temper at this time. Su Yusong coughed lightly and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, Grandpa D. The situation of the battle is still under control. I already know that although the Black Tower was destroyed, there were not many casualties. The demons took advantage of the storm to attack. Their main goal was to destroy the Black Tower as a line of defense. They only suffered some losses when they chased after them. However, there were no casualties among those above the true state and those below. I'm asking you about the red bead." Grandpa D interrupted him and stared at him coldly. Su Yusong was stunned again, because he realized that Grandpa D seemed to be asking about the red bead, and not using it as a pretext. This Grandpa D was not a patient person. Usually he was more like an arrogant playboy. If something did not go his way, he would immediately fly into a rage. But now that he had asked twice, his tone was unusually stern and calm. It could be seen that, to him, the red pearl seemed to be of utmost importance, so much so that even his own emotions were restrained and he was extremely solemn. The elders had always been mysterious. Su Yusong knew this. Therefore he put away the doubts in his heart. Even though he was puzzled, he still paused. The red pearl, according to Ku Chanzi, it has fallen into the hands of the demons. Old Master D was silent for a while. Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia did not say anything. The two of them had already made preparations before they came. As for how the Black Tower would fall, what would happen after the fall, and how they would defend against the demons' attacks, they all had their own plans. He hoped that this crisis would make the elders unable to sit still on Cloud Mountain and send the two of them out as soon as possible. Unexpectedly, he was asking about Hongzhu? With a gloomy face, Grandpa D took 2 steps forward and stopped in front of Su Yusong. He was only 1 step away from him. Su Yusong now had the original appearance of the sage of calligraphy, a white-haired old man. Therefore he looked slightly shorter than Old Master D. This Old Master D's face was cold and he stared at him oppressively. This made Su Yusong feel unhappy. If the matter was not handled well, it would be fine if he was reprimanded. But even if he was reprimanded rudely like just now, he would still feel unhappy in his heart. The two of them were no longer the wandering souls of the past. They were the leaders of the orthodox Shen men in the world, and they already had the idea of independence in their hearts. How could they accept this kind of treatment with a clear conscience? He frowned slightly, planning to take a step back, then suppress his emotions and say some words to ease the atmosphere. But he did not expect. Old Master D raised his hand and gave him a heavy slap. The sound was crisp and it reverberated in the hall. Su Yusong's eyes widened, and he looked at Old Master D in disbelief. He was stunned for a moment. But Old Master D did not pay attention to him. Instead, he walked unhurriedly to Zhuomuxia's side, and similarly raised his hand, about to give him a slap. Zhuomuxia reacted at this moment and he instinctively wanted to dodge. But the anger that Old Master D had been suppressing since he saw the two of them seemed to finally burst out. He shouted sternly, "How dare you!" At this moment, Su Yusong had already come back to her senses. She grabbed Zhuomuxia's hand and pulled her back. At this moment, Old Master D's palm fell on her face again. It also left a bright red palm print. Then he took a step back and glared at the two sages. And Su Yusong also glared at him. He did not hide his anger at all. Even though they were wandering souls, their status now was different from the past. If they could still calmly smile and endure such a great humiliation, then they would have a guilty conscience. But Old Master D did not care about his anger. He glared at the two of them and said word by word, "I will give you 5 days. Take the red bead back for me and put it in my hand. After 5 days, if I don't see the red bead, you too, don't go back to Yunshan." They had only seen Old Master D for a quarter of an hour. But in such a short period of time, Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia's emotions had fluctuated greatly, as if a year had passed. They had planned for a long time. Didn't they just want to have Chuyun Mountain? In order to achieve this goal, they did not hesitate to use Yunshan as a bargaining chip. They wanted to release the demons into Tongtian Swamp while the situation was under control, forcing the elders to ask them to solve the problem. But now, after so many calculations, it was only because of a red bead. Old Master D asked them to leave the mountain. The two of them were stunned, but Old Master D did not want to talk to them anymore. He flicked his sleeves and turned around saying, "Go now." Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia looked at each other. They saw the palm print on each other's face. But their minds were not on the palm print, but filled with surprise and confusion. So after 2 breaths they did not say anything more. They were afraid that Old Master D would change his mind. They just said stiffly, "Then let's go." Then they quickly walked out of the room. After a quarter of an hour, the two of them returned to Shaoyin Mountain. They sat facing each other for a long time without saying anything. First, it was because happiness came too suddenly. The thing that was supposed to happen more than 10 days later came ahead of schedule, and they were not ready for some things. Second, it was because they had to find out what was wrong with the red bead. Red bead. Su Yusong frowned. "Do you still remember the origin of this thing?" There were so many treasures on Yunshan Mountain that even sages could not remember them all. Zhuomuxia usually took care of these things. When Su Yusong asked this, she gritted her teeth and took out a jade slip from her sleeves to check it carefully. Then she heard Su Yusong say again, "Now that he mentioned it, I remember." When he spoke, he was also gritting his teeth. It was obvious that his anger had not dissipated. At that time, we talked about this plan in front of them to make the demons and demons of the Shenmen suffer. They didn't ask too many details and agreed. But after that, it was also the barbarian who called me alone and asked me about the important points. I did not think too much at that time. I only mentioned building a defense line at the exit of Yeshong Plain. He did not mention it and asked me some other things. At that time I was slightly puzzled. Why did he suddenly care about these things? After talking in circles for a long time, he changed the topic and told me that the entrance of Yeshong Plain was flat, and there were many demons, so a powerful killing tool was needed to defend it. He also said that he once saw a red bead in Xianmen. It was the most suitable for this kind of situation. At that time, I did not think too much. Su Yusong frowned and twisted his beard. I just thought that he said it on a whim. But I felt that it was not good to disappoint him, and this black tower was indeed suitable for defending against demons, so I used it. But now that I think about it... At this point, Zhuomuxia interrupted. I found it. The female sword saint handed the jade slip in her palm to him. Take a look yourself. No wonder you and I have no impression of it. Su Yusong took the jade slip and looked and found out. The red bead was not a treasure left behind by a saint. Instead, it was discovered by the elders more than 1,000 years ago. Actually, it was not the elders, but Grandpa D. As for how it was discovered, there was no detailed record. But after discovering its extraordinary power, it was included in the list of precious treasures of Xianmen. This was strange. It was not a treasure refined by a saint, but its power was comparable to the treasure left behind by a saint. Su Yusong looked at the jade slip and frowned. After 2 breaths of silence, he looked up at Zhuomuxia. This matter is unusual. Zhuomuxia also nodded meaningfully. The anger on their faces had completely disappeared, as if the importance of this matter made them not in the mood to be angry. To Li Yunxin, the elders of the Freemasonry were extremely mysterious. To Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia, as well as many wandering souls of the Freemasonry, how could it not be the same? Apart from the 2 of them, no other wandering souls had seen the elders. Now that the 2 of them wanted to be independent, they naturally had to understand the thoughts of the elders better and be prepared, even for the possibility of a falling out in the future. But all along, the elders seemed to be a monolithic block. They had an extremely consistent goal. To the wandering souls, they were a solid piece of iron with no gap to be found. But now, a gap seemed to have appeared. At that time, it was that barbarian who summoned me alone and told me about using the red pearl. Su Yusong said in a deep voice, and now he summoned us alone to ask about the red pearl. During this period he did not mention the other elders, nor did he say anything else. This means, the other elders do not know about this, Zhuomuxia said. This is one of his secrets. Among the elders, there are also secrets. It also means that there may be different forces among them. This is a pleasant surprise. Su Yusong said this and got up, paced 2 steps, turned to look at Zhuomuxia. As for how the red pearl was broken, it was actually broken by wind and rain. How is this possible? There must be something fishy. I have already said that Li Yunxin did not tell the truth. The dragons actually have this magical power to break a profound Taoist artifact with wind and rain. Let's go and ask him now. His days of comfort are coming to an end. Chapter 479. At this moment 2 people were talking about Li Yunxin, not on Cloud Mountain but on the Black Tower. Half of the Black Tower had collapsed, but the remaining half was still more than 500 feet. More than 500 feet. In the world where Li Yunxin came from, it was 170 meters, nearly 60 stories high. Looking down from such a height, the demon soldiers and demon generals were all like ants. The vast landscape could be seen in one's eyes. It was a vast ocean of water. The wind and rain had stopped. But in the past few hours, the rain that fell on this land was almost equivalent to the annual rainfall of the entire Yi country. So looking ahead, there was no land or trees. The flood reached the horizon, and the demon soldiers and generals were all moving with the water. Those who were not good at swimming were carried by the giant demon beasts. Those who were good at swimming were like fish in water, flying forward and chasing the low-level cultivators who were lagging behind, causing many casualties. Hatred stood with his hands behind his back, looking into the distance. His robe fluttered violently in the strong wind. Against the steely blue sky, he actually had a lofty aura. With such a great victory, the 2 sages of Cloud Mountain must be exasperated. He narrowed his eyes and there was no expression on his face. It seems that our 9th brother is in a bad situation. In another 3 days, if he doesn't come back, young Dragon Master, your restriction? Zither Jun stood beside him. However, his sleeves didn't flutter in the wind and just hung there quietly. My restriction is about to erase his body and soul. He sighed lightly, and his regretful expression was more touching than most women in the world. He was originally 9 brothers and sisters. If he could really come back as promised, we would bury the hatchet and our family would be harmonious. How good would that be? But now, He turned to look down, his butterfly-like eyelashes drooping. What he saw was Zhang Jingzhong sitting under the black tower, on the shoulder of the giant golden-horned hoe. This person could actually find us and tell us how to crack the mysterious gate's treasure. When I looked at this person, I only felt that there was an evil aura on him. I thought about it carefully and found it familiar. Later on I thought, isn't it because of ninth brother's chi? Our ninth brother knows a lot of things. He paused and looked at Hatred. And he's a little more knowledgeable than you and me. Hatred raised his eyebrows. Stronger? I'm not talking about cultivation. It's not even a method. The Zither monarch narrowed her eyes as she looked ahead. She raised her hand and pointed. What lies ahead is chaos. The general situation of the world has changed. We can no longer live in seclusion in the remote mountains and Great Lakes like before. We have to come out into the world. But when he came out into the world, he had to deal with people. But second brother, haven't you realized? We don't know anything. Do you know Munanju? You should have heard of it before. I heard about it too. But who knew when ninth brother would receive their help? This ninth brother of ours is not the ninth brother of the past. He knows far more than we do. After that, when the chaotic times come, it's hard to say who will be able to prosper like a fish in water. Hatred was silent for a while. He frowned. So, young Dragon Master doesn't plan to kill him. The Zither monarch smiled. When did I say I want to kill him? As long as he can come back to us, I'll be happy and gratified. Why would I kill him? Hatred blinked and stopped talking. It seemed that he couldn't tell whether his big brother was speaking the truth or not. The Zither monarch sighed with a smile. But since you mentioned it today, it's fine. As big brothers, we should take a look at our little brother's current situation. As she said this, she stretched out her slender finger and touched her forehead. Then she pulled it. It was as if something was being pulled out of his mind. Many blurry lights and shadows were drawn into a seemingly sticky line. Finally, it left his forehead and gathered at the tip of her finger. The Zither monarch twisted her wrist again. The lights and shadows were drawn into circles and finally connected into one. It turned into something similar to Su Yusong's mirror talisman. Li Yunxin could be seen. Seeing this, Hatred was stunned. Then he whispered, "Young Dragon Master. That's Cloud Mountain. There are two Grand Elders. If they find out," the Zither monarch smiled. "Grand Elder? So what?" "Grand Elder? So what?" When the Zither monarch said this, Li Yunxin also heard it. Because at the moment when the Zither monarch's image was formed, he and Hatred appeared in the house where Li Yunxin was imprisoned. But it was not a real person but a virtual image. And this virtual image was unstable, as if it could disappear at any time. But even so, Li Yunxin was shocked. At that time he had nothing to do and could only use his sharp nails to carve on a stone. Now that he was halfway done, he suddenly heard someone talking in the house. He jumped up from the bamboo bed and turned around. And so he saw his two brothers. The Zither monarch's image appeared. She frowned and looked around. "There's a restriction. It looks like this." She relaxed her brows. "I thought Cloud Mountain was a paradise on earth, very beautiful. But now it looks even simpler than my Four Seasons palace. Compared to your resplendent golden palace, it's even more." Before she could finish her words, Li Yunxin jumped up from the bamboo bed and shouted as if he had seen a relative, "Big brother, second brother, I miss you so much. Save me." He shouted this sentence with sincerity. Hatred was still expressionless. The Zither monarch laughed. "I haven't seen you for a few days. How did you become like this? Tell me, why do you miss big brother and second brother?" Li Yunxin immediately said, "You two don't know. After I came to Cloud Mountain, I was humiliated by those two old men. They wanted me to join Xianmen. Why would I do such a thing? Those two old men pretended to be nice to me. On one hand they wanted to marry their daughter to me. On the other hand they slandered my two brothers. They said that the young Dragon Master was neither a man nor a woman. They said that second brother was brave but not smart." Li Yunxin said with hatred, "Bah. I immediately turned against them and thought that they would rather die than submit." The Zither monarch laughed again. "Good ninth brother. Let's not talk about this for now. Let me tell you something good. We have broken the Black Tower of Xianmen and are now marching towards Tongtian Swamp." Li Yunxin was delighted. "You two are here to save me? That means I have been of great help in many things I have done in Cloud Mountain." The Zither monarch was still smiling. Ninth brother has indeed helped. But not in Cloud Mountain. Outside Cloud Mountain. A few days ago General Zhang came. He called himself the Deputy General of the Li Kingdom's floating army and, the manager of Moon Anju. Ninth brother, do you know about Moon Anju? Li Yunxin rolled his eyes and immediately said, Of course I do. I was the one who ordered this. The Zither monarch looked at Hatred. I told you that our ninth brother is stronger than the two of us. Look, he is able to come up with strategies from thousands of miles away and enter the tiger's den unscathed. He is truly a rare talent. Li Yunxin's face immediately turned bitter. Young Dragon Master, please don't joke around. Although I am fine now, those two old bastards said that they will sacrifice me on the day of the war. Now that you two are so powerful and have broken through their camp, I am afraid they will bring me out of Cloud Mountain tomorrow and kill me in front of you too. The Zither monarch laughed. That General Zhang was sent by ninth brother to help us. How could ninth brother not have predicted that the war would be brought forward? Li Yunxin was rendered speechless by his question. She opened her mouth but no words came out. At this time Hatred coughed. Ninth brother. Now that things have come to this, I will not say anything useless to you. I will only ask you two things. If you tell me in detail, I can plead with young Dragon Master to save your life. But if you still feel estranged from us and are unwilling to be honest with us, then I will not be able to do anything. Even if my heart aches, I will not be able to save you. Li Yunxin immediately nodded as if he had found a life-saving straw. Please ask, as long as ninth brother knows, I will tell you everything I know. Hatred looked at him. First, how did ninth brother become the dragon-kissed body you have today? Second, I know that on the night that Wanderer Bai died, ninth brother and I talked. What did we talk about that night? I adjust. Hearing these two questions, Li Yunxin hesitated for a while. It was in this moment that he suddenly heard another voice say, Yes. I also want to know whether what you said to me that day about how you became Long Sun is true or not. Since your two brothers are here today, why don't you say it again? The door curtain was lifted and Su Yusong and Zhuomu entered the room. The atmosphere suddenly became extremely strange. The demons and the profound sect were fighting. But at this moment, the actual commanders of both sides met in this room. Seeing the two sages enter the room, Hatred immediately groaned. But Zither Monarch's expression was the same as usual. She waved her sleeves and raised her arms in front of her. So this is what the two sages look like. It is rude of me to come here as a guest. But I won't be rude for too long. I think my ninth brother has already told you that I planted a restriction in his soul. I was fortunate enough to come here today because I activated the restriction in his soul. But this restriction was only a lamp. What was being burned was his spiritual energy. When the spiritual energy is exhausted, it will burn his body and soul. Thus, my second brother and I could only meet the two of you like this. Hearing this, Li Yunxin's expression became very ugly. He gritted his teeth. Young Dragon Master. I'm here to do something for you. Zither Monarch smiled. Who said it wasn't? Ninth brother, answer your second brother's two questions and I'll think of a way to save you. How about it? Hearing this, Su Yusong laughed coldly. Demons, they are demons after all. Cruel, cunning and cold-blooded. Li Yunxin. He looked at him coldly. Previously we waited for you to sincerely surrender and gave you a chance time and time again, but you were stubborn. How do you feel now? Your big brother demon and second brother demon don't want to save you. They want you to die early. Now you've tasted the feeling of not responding to heaven and earth, being driven into a corner, and being deserted by your friends and family? You scoundrel, like to sow discord, haven't you thought of today's retribution? It was as if he thought that his savior had arrived, but now he found out that the savior was actually a killer, a demon that hastened his life. Li Yunxin looked disheartened. He had nowhere to vent his anger and even his body was trembling. But in reality, just as the Zither Monarch had said, his spiritual energy was being rapidly consumed by the techniques of the peak profound realm demon. In just a short while he lost his strength and staggered 2 steps back, falling onto the bamboo couch. Zither Monarch shook her head and sighed. It seems that ninth brother was right. These days you've suffered a lot of humiliation, and your strength is also lacking. Your spiritual energy is being consumed so quickly. Since that's the case, it seems that you're ready to die. Ninth brother, see you at the battlefield. With these words, he flicked his sleeves, and the 2 profound realm demons instantly vanished into thin air. In the next moment, Zither Monarch, who was standing on top of the black tower, stopped smiling. She thought for a while. Then she turned to look at Hatred and said in a low voice, "Now I'm relieved. The 2 sages of Cloud Mountain didn't save little Nine. Although there are many things he didn't say, there's nothing to worry about. But Second brother, did you notice? There's something wrong with the two sages. Chapter 480. Almost at the same time, Su Yusong turned to Zhuomuxia and said, Long Da and Long Air have probably sensed that something is wrong with us. It was actually a very simple reason. Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia acted too much like humans. Whether it was the way they spoke or the way they acted, they were no different from ordinary people. But profound realm cultivators already had the same gloomy and rigid expression. As for the twin sages, for the first time since the ancient times, when demons broke into Cloud Mountain or even the small Cloud Mountain, the twin sages didn't do anything. They didn't do anything to the illusions of the two demons, nor did they do anything to the demons themselves. This didn't seem like something a saint would do. After saying this, he sighed in a low voice. I didn't expect the restriction on Li Yunxin to have such a function, to be able to spy on our Cloud Mountain. Fortunately, he wasn't locked up in any important place. This time we miscalculated. We can't afford to make any mistakes when dealing with those demons. I've already sent people to the wilderness forest. As for Shiliu, she's also been sent to Moon Enju to spy on the situation. Next, he paused, we should leave the mountain. First, we need to stabilize the situation in Heavenspan Swamp. He and Zhuomuxia said these words in front of Li Yunxin without any hesitation. It seemed like they were treating him like a dead person or a decoration. Zhuomuxia glanced at him. Earlier, I said I would spare his life. Li Yunxin suddenly raised his head. Su Yusong frowned. AI. This matter is also one of the few things that change again and again between you and me. Before, I wanted to spare his life, because of Moon Enju. Who would have thought things would change so quickly, and now we know that Long Da's restriction is burning him. That Long Da is a peak profound realm demon, and he was born with strange abilities. Right now, it's hard for us to deal with this restriction. Since that's the case, let's stick to our previous arrangement. Take him to the front of the formation as a sacrifice. But now, let Moon Enju's people see that Li Yunxin didn't die in our hands, but in the hands of the demons. If Moon Enju's master really values him, it's also a good way to create enmity between them and the demons. Zhuomuxia nodded. That's good. I've wanted him dead for a long time. As soon as the two of them finished talking, they heard Li Yunxin suddenly laugh coldly. It's hard to draw a tiger but hard to draw its bones. If you two are just wandering ghosts, you want to be a true saint. You want to imitate your appearance and temperament. In the end, you even lost your own heart. You keep saying that if you become a saint for a long time, you will naturally have a heart for the world. Don't you know that you're still imitating? Now, he seemed to have lost all hope of survival and knew that he would die. Therefore, he no longer tried to compromise, nor did he try to flatter them. He revealed his true nature. Now even your hearts are imitating me. Oh. From head to toe, from inside to outside, apart from that pitiful obsession, there is nothing else that belongs to you. Ha! Oh, what a joke, what a joke. Li Ta sat up on the bamboo couch. His lips were pale and his eyes were sunken. He looked like a dying man. However, his spirit was very strong, as if he was burning the last of his life force. Do you know what a real big shot looks like? If you don't, you can go take a look at that zither lady in hatred. Although they are only in the profound realm, their innate temperament is something that you two heartless ghosts can't learn. A real big shot's words carry enormous weight and their stand is firm. They do things with a clear goal. Once they've decided, they won't be easily swayed. Just like the two of them. They didn't plan to let me live in the nest. Just now when I came here, they still didn't plan to let me live. You two said that you want to let the world see that I die in their hands? Ha! That's exactly what I want. Dying in their hands is much more dignified than dying in the hands of the two of you, who are indecisive and capricious, who decide whether you will live or die the next day. They are worthy of my identity as Wei River Dragon King. After saying these words in one breath, he began to pant as if he had used up a lot of energy. Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia looked at each other and laughed. It seems that he really doesn't have any other way now. Su Yusong said this to Zhuomuxia, then turned to look at Li Yunxin. If you had shown this kind of temperament from the beginning, you wouldn't have fallen to this point today. Unfortunately, you always think that you're smart and like to calculate. Then I'll still say what I said to you a few days ago. You don't know that the world is dangerous and not everything is under your control. Now, have a taste of what it feels like to be a victim of your own cleverness. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Yunxin suddenly jumped up from the bamboo couch and shouted, I'll kill you first. When he jumped up, he raised his arms like the wings of a big bird. Many little people made of lines swarmed out, immediately filling the whole room. As soon as the little people appeared, they opened their mouths and cursed. But because there were too many people, the curses were continuous, like a demonic voice penetrating the brain. As they cursed, they pounced on the two fake saints, using all kinds of weapons in their hands to hack, slash, or stab, directly attacking the vital parts. But Su Yusong didn't panic and even had the leisure to turn to Zhuomuxia and say with a smile, "Look, he really left something behind." Then he shouted, "Suppress." The many curses immediately turned into a curling buzz. Looking at the room again, those people were nowhere to be seen. They had all been suppressed to the ground, the table, and the wall. But Li Yunxin was also not in the room. Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia turned to look. Li Yunxin had actually gone out of the room, and was about to rush to the wall surrounded by the big locust trees. But it seemed that breaking the prohibition and rushing there was his limit. Finally his strength ran out, his legs gave way and he fell to the ground. Su Yusong snorted and strolled over. Li Yunxin stopped running. He turned around and sat on the ground, staring at Su Yusong without saying a word. "I didn't expect you to be able to break this prohibition. You have the ability. Since you can break it, why didn't you escape earlier?" Li Yunxin's chest rose and fell violently. After a while he gritted his teeth and said, This kind of prohibition technique is very clumsy. I thought about the cultivation method of the painting sect for a few days, and I can naturally break it today. What's so strange about it? But you two idiots, it would be strange if you didn't make any progress after thousands of years." But Su Yusong didn't bother to argue with him. He just laughed. "Fine. Your time is coming, I'll let you have your way with words." Then he lifted him up and together with Zhuomuxia, leaped straight out of the mountain. These two fake saints were trapped in Cloud Mountain for 1,000 years, while Li Yunxin was only trapped for a few days. But now they finally broke out of the cage together, and went straight to the wider world outside. It was unknown whether it was a blessing or a curse. Chapter 481. A huge rolling stone with flames and lightning coiling around its surface fell to the ground from the crazily tumbling fiery clouds in the sky with a whistling sound. Where it landed, 3 emptiness realm swordsmen of the Kenzo were controlling their flying swords to fight against a huge demonic beast. The demonic beast was excited and revealed its true form. It was a huge wild boar. This wild boar was bigger than an ordinary bull, and its tusk was half the height of a human. Although this demon was also in the emptiness realm, it was already famous for its thick skin and thick flesh even before it attained the Tao. Even a fierce tiger couldn't do anything to it, let alone a demon that had attained the emptiness realm. Its body was far stronger than that of a cultivator of the same level. Therefore, even if the 3 flying swords of the Kenzo cultivators pierced through its body, it was still very difficult to break through its leather armor. Under normal circumstances, the Emptiness Realm sword cultivators were not afraid of the Emptiness Realm demons and devils. There were many magical powers and magic arts in the Shenmen sect that could make the stupid demons and devils panic. Then the cultivators would look for an opportunity to strike a fatal blow. For thousands of years, the cultivators had used this method to subdue demons and devils. But now, it was on the battlefield. It was true that the low-level cultivators wanted to use their divine abilities and dharma spells, but how could the demons who outnumbered them give them time and space? They rushed over like a raging tide. In the blink of an eye, every inch of land and sky was filled with the smell of blood, stench, fire clouds, lightning and poisonous fog. In this terrifying battle formation, there was no room for the Taoists and swordsmen to calmly set up a formation. They had retreated in a hurry, and the larger and wider formation had not been formed yet. As for the small formation, in this battlefield filled with resentment and spiritual power, even a true realm cultivator would find it difficult to set up a stable formation in an instant. Not to mention, the low-level cultivators in the blessed paradises had to be careful with their spells. Before the eye of the formation was formed, the crazily surging spiritual power would have already backfired on the caster. Needless to say, once these demonic beasts got excited, they did not care about life and death. They only rushed forward with bloodshot eyes. They did not care about how many wounds they received or how far they went into the enemy's formation. Therefore, when the stones fell, the demonic beasts did not notice. Although the 3 sword cultivators saw it, they could not get away from the pig demon. They did not even have time to dodge. The place where the 3 humans and 1 demon fought immediately turned into a 10 feet deep pit. The Emptiness Realm sword cultivator was immediately crushed into meat paste, and the demon pig was blasted into the pit. His real body looked huge, but the rolling stone was even bigger. Compared to the rolling stone, he was just a peanut beside a wine cup. This was only the first time it bounced on the ground. It immediately jumped out of the pit, rumbling as it continued to roll forward. Everywhere they went, fiend demons and cultivators were turned into minced meat. It was as if a stone was crushing a colony of ants, plowing a path of blood. However, there wasn't just one such rolling stone, but thousands of them. For a moment, the area where the two armies met was badly mangled. They advanced another 1,000 feet into the cultivator formation, until this rolling stone, which was even bigger than a palace in the mortal world, was suddenly hit by a person's fist, stopped and held up with both hands. That fist was half the size of this rolling stone, and that person was a golden-armored deity who was dozens of feet tall. Ordinary cultivators were only the size of cats and dogs by his feet. This rolling stone was only a slightly bigger stone in his arms. This was not anything else, but a Daotong cultivator who specialized in the giant spirit magic. He transformed himself into a giant spirit god. As soon as these golden giants appeared, the huge stone formation became a laughable stone formation. There were hundreds of such huge figures in the Daotong cultivator's formation. Taking the huge stone in front of his chest, he suddenly squeezed. The huge stone, that was surrounded by fire and lightning, immediately let out an earth-shattering scream. It was not a stone but a huge armadillo. Unfortunately, these huge armadillos had fallen into the hands of an even bigger deity. With just a punch and a squeeze they were already dead. Blood rained down from the sky like a huge blood-colored waterfall, emitting an even more shocking and terrifying stench. Then, the mighty miracle god strode forward and collided with the equally huge and terrifying demonic beast that had revealed its true form. In between the legs of the mighty miracle god and the demonic beast, there were also countless, small demonic beasts and cultivators fighting each other. But after the giant spirit god, whose face was so huge that one couldn't even see it, fought with the demon beast for a while, he immediately jumped up and dodged to the side. Because the sole of his foot stepped over. That wild boar demon's shoulder height was even higher than a sword cultivator's. But compared to the rolling stone that the wild boar demon had transformed into, the armadillo demon was only the size of the latter's foot. And in the arms of the giant spirit god, this huge armadillo demon was only a slightly bigger stone ball. But compared to the foot of the giant spirit god, it was like an ant. This foot, which was wrapped in thick leather armor, with just one step, trampled the giant spirit god and the demons and cultivators around him into meat paste. Above the sole of the foot was a thick and sturdy leg that was like a giant pillar that supported the sky. This was an elephant demon. In fact, there was far more than one elephant demon, or rather, a demon like this. Their huge bodies were scattered across the vast battlefield, and their faces could no longer be seen, because they were above the crazily rolling fiery clouds in the sky. If one looked up from the ground, they would only be able to see their huge bodies disappearing into the vast sky, far beyond the range of one's vision. It was as if they had been standing there since the beginning of the world, and with just a stretch of their hands, they could touch the heaven where the celestials lived. Previously, the battlefield had been filled with the deafening sound of thunder from the sky. And those thunder sounds were the sounds made when these terrifying giant beasts fought against the high-level cultivators of the celestial sect above the clouds. There were also fiery clouds rolling in the sky. They pressed heavily on the ground, extending from one side of the sky to the other, completely blocking out the sun, moon, and stars. And these fiery clouds were not intentionally created by the demons and cultivators. They were the spiritual power, demonic wind, lightning, and flames stirred up during the battle. They lingered in the sky for a long time, accumulating more and more until finally they covered the entire sky. This was the main battlefield where the demon army and the celestial sect's line of defense towards the heaven-reaching swamp met. Not only were there the cultivators who had originally set up defenses here, there were also cultivators who had retreated from the Black Tower. The three sides quickly mixed together, and in an instant the battlefield almost crossed the entire Yezhong Plains. Demons and cultivators of the true tier and above were all fighting in the sky. It was because every single move and thought of these terrifying experts was so powerful. If they were a little closer to the ground, they would be like the enormous true bodies of those true realm and profound realm demons, who could indiscriminately annihilate hundreds of soldiers from both sides and the enemy with a single stomp. And because of the battle between them, perhaps a flash of sword light could traverse thousands of miles. Not only could it affect the low-level cultivators on the ground, it could also accidentally hurt their allies. Demons didn't have much experience in large-scale battles, and the cultivators of the celestial sect didn't either. But the difference was that demons had coarse skin and thick flesh, and rarely used mystical powers. Even if they accidentally hurt each other, a powerful strike might not cause serious damage to their own kind. But the techniques of high-level cultivators were already extremely profound and powerful. Their attacks, the powerful bodies of demons were already strenuous to resist, not to mention their comrades whose bodies were far less powerful. Previously, the cultivators of the celestial sect had thought that demons were a motley crew, and once their attacks were thwarted, they would collapse. Thus, they spent a great deal of effort here wanting to properly snipe them and give the rear more time to regroup. But who knew that these demons were a motley crew and collapse was fake? Before the fiendish demons were killed, they still looked like humans. But once they saw blood, smelled the thick scent of blood and felt pain, their eyes instantly turned red, and they didn't care who was friend or foe, they only knew to fight with their lives on the line. For a moment, this vast land was rained with blood. There were terrifying giant beasts that collapsed, and cultivators of the celestial sect exploded into fiery clouds. There were also countless corpses that were summoned from the battlefield to pick up their weapons, and there were also cultivators who had lost their minds that were devoured by the demons, and turned into the demonic power of the enemies. On the ground, corpses piled up into mountains, and in the air, demon beasts swooped down in the dense rain of swords. Above the fiery clouds, there were even thunder and lightning flashing as if the gods were angry. Occasionally, a huge cloud would crash down due to the aftermath of a battle between powerful figures, and in a breath's time, it would take away thousands of lives. Tens of thousands of demons and cultivators, who were terrifying to mortals, had now become tiny creatures surging between the legs of a huge existence, like a colony of ants. As for those so-called giant existences, compared to the even larger demons, they were nothing more than ants. The terrifying war between heaven and earth not only surpassed the limits of what mortals could imagine, it also far exceeded the endurance of the cultivators of the celestial sect. One must know, they originally wanted to cultivate immortality. Cultivate immortality and then slay demons and uphold justice. And this matter was just to strengthen their Tao heart and understand the greater good. But now, these cultivators who should have abandoned their emotions and desires, had no choice but to enter the battlefield. Countless cultivators were buried in blood and fire. And these people who were originally known as the noble Sendo in the world saw the common people as ants and had the highest status in this world, but now they had become ants. Demons had long been used to fighting and killing. But in the process of cultivation, cultivators had always tried to avoid this kind of thing. Participating in this war was already something that went against their conscience. For many people, it would seriously affect their state of mind, and it would be harmful to their cultivation. And today, the matter of eliminating demons, which they thought would be easy, had become a terrifying tug of war, a stalemate. The morale of the celestial sect was already unstable. And the most terrible thing was that this scene was not the first battle. It was already the third day after the fall of the Black Tower. Chapter 482. In fact, such a fierce battle was only one of the several small-scale battles between the demons and the defenders of the Gate of Wonders in the past 3 days. The fierce battle lasted for 2 hours. Just like the previous few times, the cultivators of the Gate of Wonders gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. In fact, it shouldn't have been like this. When they decided to guard the Gate of Wonders and fight against the demons, everyone thought that this would be an extremely easy hunting operation. There were even more low-level cultivators who were indignant and excited. Most of these cultivators didn't give up too much lust, and some even regarded it as their duty to kill the demons and protect the Tao. However, when they traveled in the world, they were told that they could kill evil little demons if they met them. If they didn't do evil, they should just ignore them. As for the big demons, once they met them, no matter what they were doing, they shouldn't attack them easily. They should just observe them carefully and then report to their masters. But in fact, almost all low-level cultivators who traveled in the world had encountered this kind of situation. Big demons ate humans and harmed people in the world. They couldn't fight against them, and they didn't want to enjoy the offerings of the human world for nothing. Therefore they reported to their masters. However, after waiting for a long time, or even so long that the children of the victims had all become old people, their masters still didn't respond. At this time, if those low-level cultivators didn't die in the training, and didn't grow old because they didn't achieve their Tao, and instead became more powerful, they would know. In fact, there wouldn't be any result. Big demons eating people was a disaster for people in a certain place. But for the whole world, it was nothing. Those brutal demons were already forced by the Gate of Wonders and didn't dare to gather followers, nor did they dare to show up in public. If even eating people occasionally was forbidden, the whole Midland would immediately be ignited by the fire of war. But at this time, These more powerful cultivators had also abandoned more lust, and wouldn't be angry about this kind of thing anymore. And the passion, anger, and the dream of changing the world when they were young and inexperienced had already become the rising smoke in the incense burner, slowly fading in the peaceful air of Cloud Mountain. Although they were old, there were still young people who didn't know much about the world. As a result, when this battle was finally about to begin, countless young low-level cultivators were filled with passion. They believed that the day to sweep away all the evil in the world had finally arrived. But these young cultivators, most of whom were much older than Li Yunxin, could not see or influence the decisions of the higher-ups. In their eyes, they could only see that the situation between the celestial sect of wonders and the demons was getting more and more tense. In the darkness of the night, they could also see that the star representing the Cloud Mountain was getting more and more resplendent. Even though they knew that a great battle was coming, they believed that the 36 paradises and 72 factions, faction masters and faction leaders were already prepared for it. He also believed that the two sages on the Cloud Mountain who had unparalleled cultivation bases in the world would devise a strategy and decide the outcome of the battle from 1,000 miles away. The hot-blooded people simply believed that the current celestial sect of wonders was still the celestial sect of wonders that had protected the world for 50,000 years. They wanted to use their bodies and souls to maintain the righteousness and responsibility in their hearts. But he didn't know that the more brilliant cultivators didn't care about such things. As for the top cultivators, even the two sages, they were no longer the benevolent, wise, and boundless magical powers they had imagined. Li Yunxin had once offered a plan to the Zither Lord in hatred, to have the emperors of the secular world die and become ghost emperors in order to control the high-level cultivators of the celestial sect of wonders. The two Dragon Sun had accepted his plan and put it into practice a few days ago. Thus, the Qing Emperor and the Yi Emperor had truly become ghost emperors. The secular dynasties and the celestial sect of wonders were divided. For this reason, the celestial sect of wonders had no choice but to send even more cultivators to various parts of the world as a precaution. Then, the formation that Li Yunxin had set in the wilderness forest showed unusual movements, so they could only send some other cultivators to guard the wilderness forest. Thus, the high-level cultivators of the celestial sect of wonders were split into 3 places under the secret operations of the demons and the Freemasons. When the 3 places merged into one, they had an absolute advantage against the demons. But now they were at a disadvantage everywhere. This was the result that the demons wanted, and it was also the result that the Freemasons had wanted in the past. However, in Li Yunxin's words, Su Yusong and Zhuomuzha had not expected that they seemed to have gone too far. They wanted the situation to become bad, but they didn't want it to become this bad. Thus, this short battle would soon end with the defeat of the celestial sect of wonders. With this defeat, the first line of defense would completely collapse. The defeated army would have to retreat to the second line of defense. However, the difference between the battles of the secular armies was that because of their boundless strength and tyrannical bodies, the pace of the battle between the demons and the cultivators was faster. They almost didn't need any rations or supplies. For the demons there were supplies everywhere. The flesh and blood of the cultivators were rich in spiritual energy and were a rare delicacy in the world. As for the cultivators, they could eat the wind and drink the dew without needing any rations. As for the cultivators who really needed food and water, they were all the hot-blooded, righteous, and responsible low-level cultivators that had been mentioned before. These people, they died the most. They died the fastest. With this defeat of the celestial sect of wonders, they retreated to the second line of defense. If it was a mortal army in the secular world, they might have a few days to rest and take a breather. They would think of countermeasures and deploy their troops. However, the demons were not an army that moved slowly. They needed a lot of time to rest and march. A horse that could travel 1,000 miles in a day and 800 miles at night was only as fast as a snail to these demons. They would chase after the defeated army. When the defeated army retreated to the second line of defense, they would continue to launch a storm-like attack. Therefore, when many cultivators began to leave in defeat, thinking that the situation might be difficult to reverse, on the incomparably vast battlefield, in the ears of almost everyone, there was a clear, steady, and powerful voice that was full of unquestionable power. Death. Every Daotong cultivator knew what this word meant. This was the first law spell that only the cultivators in the transcendent state of Daotong could learn. It was also the simplest and most direct law spell, the curse of death. Back in the day, Ling Kongzi spent 7 days and 7 nights writing this spell in his residence in the city of Wei. In the past few days of fierce battles, there were countless Daotong cultivators who used this simple yet violent spell to fight against their enemies. This spell was cast by a cultivator in the transcendent state. Wherever the spell reached, anyone whose cultivation level was slightly lower than him would die immediately upon contact. However, the cultivation level of a cultivator in the transcendent state was limited. After killing 2 or 3 enemies, the spell that could not be used in a short period of time would disappear. However, when it was cast by a cultivator in the mystic state, as long as it was within the reach of his mind, the vitality of anyone below the mystic state would wither away. This was also why the high-level demons wanted to fight the high-level cultivators in the sky. The Dharma was mysterious. If they were allowed to cast it on the ground, the demon soldiers and demon generals would have been reduced to less than 10%. However, in the sky, the death curse of a cultivator in the mystic state might not be able to kill a demon in the mystic state. However, the bodies of the demons were full of vitality. When they used their demon powers, the effect of the death curse would be greatly reduced. It would only weaken them for a long time. However, this curse, everyone heard it. It was as if there was a silent gust of wind blowing across the vast battlefield where it would take half a day for a horse to gallop from east to west. Both the humans and the demons could not help but pause. Then, the gigantic elephant demon that towered into the clouds, the cave master of the golden cave of the primordial devil of Mount Baita in the country of Yu, the white devil king of the 10 directions supporting the sky, the great demon of the mystical state of Shi, suddenly froze on the spot. A moment ago he was fighting with 4 Taoists in the true state and a mystic state swordsman. At this moment he had already killed 4 Taoists in the true state, and 2 Taoists in the mystic state were also severely injured by him. This was because the elephant demon was born with a magical power. The 2 tusks were born as 2 flying swords. During the battle today the elephant demon revealed its true form. Its body was already strong to begin with, and its true form was even stronger. With every step it took, hundreds of demons and cultivators were killed or injured. Just its trampling alone was already a terrifying weapon. But above that fiery cloud, it still had 2 flying swords, one for attack, the other for defense. Taking advantage of the time when the enemy was dealing with it, its long trunk suddenly inhaled, sucking in all the spiritual energy and resentment within a radius of several miles. If someone was caught off guard, their spiritual energy would immediately stagnate, giving him an opening to cut off their head with one sword. But such a ferocious and all-powerful great demon, after the word die was uttered, it suddenly stopped moving. The 2 huge flying swords paused for a moment, then with a buzzing sound, broke through the fiery cloud in the sky, and fell to the ground like fiery meteors. With a loud rumble they smashed out 2 huge pits that were dozens of feet deep, and affected thousands of demons and cultivators. Then the elephant demon's huge body began to wither, at a speed visible to the naked eye. Its outer armor, which was harder than metal and stone, collapsed, turning into sharp blades that filled the sky and rained down like a storm. Just the falling alone was enough to take the lives of countless cannon fodder. Then the flesh and blood turned into dust, scattering between the heaven and the earth. The demonic energy in its body also began to pour out. The surrounding area of tens of miles was covered in a gloomy fog. The thick and vigorous demonic energy caused many demons to immediately break through their realms and go berserk. It also caused many cultivators of the mystic sects to have trouble circulating their spiritual energy, almost losing their divine abilities. For a time, it was a reign of terror, a merciless massacre. The survival of a great demon at the mystical Shi realm was a terrible disaster on the battlefield. But now, the death of a great demon at the mystical Shi realm was also a disaster. After a full quarter of an hour, the skin and flesh of the elephant demon finally withered and withered. A gigantic skeleton that reached the heavens and the earth appeared on the battlefield, standing tall and erect. All because of the word, die. This sudden change happened in the blink of an eye. Some cultivators realized it while others did not. But, the deaths continued. First was the elephant demon at the mystical Shi realm. Next was the mountain shade flying tiger king at the mystical realm. Third was Demon King Ocean Wish Fulfillment at the mystical realm. These 3 terrifying great demons were the most famous great demons on the battlefield, the ones who had killed the most. Under the leadership of these 3 demons, the demon army charged at the back of the mystic sect's line of defense like a hot knife through butter. Now that these 3 demons had died instantly, the torrent of demon soldiers and generals had encountered an unbreakable reef. Among the crowd, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up. Soon, like the rising sun, it spread its light across the entire battlefield. Then it shot up to the highest point in the sky, dispersing the thick fiery clouds, revealing a vast blue sky. The moment this golden light appeared, All the demons within a radius of tens of miles instantly died. Their bodies and souls were destroyed, turning into flying ash. The mystic sect's cultivators suddenly felt their spiritual energy surge, and their spirits were shaken, as if they had received the blessings of the gods of the 9 heavens. When the oncoming demon army encountered this golden light, their attacks were completely destroyed. It was like waves hitting a reef. In an instant, they turned into countless waves condensed from blood and flesh. Then, the golden light bloomed soundlessly, and 2 figures stepped out of the void. When the light faded and the celestial music dissipated, the 2 figures were revealed to be a man and a woman. The man had the appearance of great Emperor Jiqing of the 9 heavenly stars palace, worshipped by Daotong. The woman had the appearance of Empress Wuxia Jiangyu of the 9 heavens palace, worshipped by Kenzo. The cultivators with the highest cultivation among Daotong and Kenzo, the current supreme of the mystic sects, Shen Qiongao Tianjin Ke Ling Shizhi Baodao Venerate, as well as the sword Venerate of the 5 spirits of heaven, Imperial Virtue, Thick Earth, and Universal Sword Venerate entered. Chapter 483. For a moment, the morale of the Celestial Gate was greatly boosted. In the Celestial Gate, no one had seen the Grand Supreme Sage make a move. The 2 sages had come out of the mountain to encircle the Art Saint 1,000 years ago. However, very few people knew about this matter, and even fewer people had seen it. Therefore, many people had such a guess in their hearts. If the sages attacked with all their strength, how powerful would they be? At this moment, it seemed that they had finally seen it. The 3 profound realm great demons had relied on their thick skin and natural supernatural powers. Now that there were more great demons in the field than in the Celestial Gate, they were almost invincible and had few opponents. Even the cultivators who had methods and supernatural powers above them could not do anything to them because of the situation on the battlefield and the environment of the enemy. However, the sage who had transformed into the appearance of great Emperor Jiqing had entered the field and killed the 3 demons in a breath with just a basic curse of death. How terrifying is this power? The momentum of the demon army was taken away, and their offensive immediately slowed down. However, since the 3 demons were dead, the souls of the profound realm were not that difficult to destroy. When a cultivator died, their souls would be stunned when they left their bodies. The demons were no exception. The bodies of the 3 demons were destroyed instantly, and their remnant souls came out. They stopped in the air in a daze as if they did not understand why they were here. Seeing this scene, the cultivators in the sky naturally wanted to destroy the souls. Now that Black Bai Yanjun had retreated from the world, it was still troublesome to only destroy his body and leave his remnant soul. If someone protected him, the remnant soul might be able to cultivate into a ghost cultivator again. However, there were more than 3 true realm and profound realm cultivators in the demon formation. Seeing that the 3 demon kings had fallen, they immediately swarmed over to protect them. The Celestial Gate cultivators wanted to chase, but they were soon blocked by more huge figures. Those 3 were not the only ones who had revealed their true bodies, but they were especially huge and fierce. The other demons had revealed their true bodies, and they still looked like they could penetrate the sky and the earth, almost blocking out the sunlight again. The previous battle was fierce and fierce. Now that the sages of the Celestial Gate had entered the field, the demons planned to retreat first and then come up with a long-term plan. Although the fiendish demons would go berserk when they fought, they would not become true lunatics in the end. Now that he had seen the Grand Supreme Sage, if nothing went wrong, he would only be sending himself to his death. How could he be a moth flying into a flame? However, the battlefront was so long that even if the 2 armies wanted to split up, they would not be able to do so in a short period of time. The demons slowly retreated, but the cultivators of the Celestial Sect of Wonders did not dare to chase after them. In the previous 3 days of fighting, many people were already scared of these demons. At this moment, he hoped that the 2 sages could turn the tide and kill all these demons once and for all. As for whether or not the Grand Supreme Sage had such a great divine ability, no one knew. However, the result of killing 3 monster kings with a single law curse was right before their eyes. Who would dare to doubt it? Su Yusong and Zhuomuzhe were currently standing in the void in front of the Celestial Gate army. The ground beneath him was a sea of crimson red, filled with the bones and blood of demons. Many cultivators gathered around them. However, fearing the might of the sages, they did not dare to get too close. They only stood 20 feet away from the 2 of them to protect them, like stars surrounding the moon. Seeing the situation in the distance and seeing the cultivators slowly gathering around them, Su Yusong frowned. However, when he frowned, his expression was still filled with incomparable joy and pride. Because in reality, That curse just now was the first time he had used a Taoist technique outside of Cloud Mountain in the past 1,000 years. After he and Wuxia had taken over their bodies, they had been imprisoned in Cloud Mountain. That Cloud Mountain had also restricted many divine abilities. Thus, even though they had incomparable divine power, they could not use it. 2 days ago they finally left Cloud Mountain and immediately felt the surge of spiritual power that made their hearts tremble and almost go crazy. Previously, their bodies seemed to contain a vast ocean of spiritual power, but it was firmly frozen and sunk. Only the occasional splashes of water on the surface could let them feel the existence of the infinite power. However, once they left Cloud Mountain, the frozen spiritual power immediately thawed. In the snow mountain and ocean of Qi, there was a crazy surge of spiritual power surging and circulating, running through every meridian and aperture in their bodies. Thus, they knew that their every move seemed to have the power to destroy the world. If there were only the two of them in the world, they probably could not hold back their emotions and wantonly cast their divine abilities in the vast world. But this was the battlefield of two armies after all. There were many profound and true realm cultivators. Previously, Su Yusong and Wuxia had not left Cloud Mountain, so they could only imagine the divine abilities of the profound realm and the divine abilities of the Grand Supreme. But now that they were out of Cloud Mountain and experienced it personally, they realized, in reality, many things were indeed completely different from what they had imagined. When the divine abilities were really cast, the power was far greater than they had imagined. For example, when he cast the death curse just now, originally, he only wanted to seriously injure the elephant demon. But who would have thought that it would be so powerful that not only did it curse the elephant demon to death, but it also cursed two cultivators of a higher realm to death. Compared to what he had expected, it was more than several times stronger. It was like a person looking at a peerless treasured saber from afar, thinking that the saber would be incomparably sharp and unstoppable once it was in his hand. However, when it was really in his hand, he found that not only was the saber sharp, but it was also sharp to the extent that no scabbard in the world could contain it. Although such power was incomparably powerful, it was also incomparably terrifying. It was at this time that Su Yusong could really understand what Su Sheng had said. Su Sheng said that if one did not cultivate the mind, no one could control the powerful divine abilities cultivated by the profound Taoist techniques. Although it was different from the situation of the two false saints, it was similar. Because one had to know, when they took over bodies, they only took over the body of the Grand Supreme Saint. The power in the body was only half of the Grand Supreme Saint's. The other half was like the half of the dead elephant demon, which was wasted when it died. And even the power of this half of the body was not fully exerted. Today they only wore their skin and came out. First, they were afraid that after leaving Cloud Mountain, the two would suddenly obtain too much power and be unable to control it, which would lead to disaster. The other worry was also related to the above. Longda and Longair had already seen the difference between the two, and they would definitely be suspicious. Therefore, the two of them only wore their skin and turned into the appearance of a monarch and a female monarch. In the eyes of others, they were incarnations. This meant that the two saints' original bodies were still guarding Little Cloud Mountain, and the ones who appeared on the battlefield today were only two incarnations. The power of these incarnations could not compare to the original bodies. The two of them used the two saints' skin to disguise as the two incarnations of the saints. Even if the divine abilities could not be used as they wished, and the power was greatly reduced, it was not strange. But the two wandering souls did not realize that even though it was only a quarter of the original power of the saints, they still felt terrified when they used it now. When they served the two saints in the past, they were not even in the true state, they were only at the peak of the transcendent state. After that, they did not have the chance to slowly adapt in 1,000 years, not to mention the state of mind and bearing. But it was also this thrilling feeling that caused Su Yusong's eyes to be filled with unconcealable pride and satisfaction. Such a powerful power was in his hands. If one day he obtained the method to recultivate the 6 desires tribulation body, repaired his body, and combined the skin of the saints with the muscles and bones left on Cloud Mountain into one, how powerful would that be? Because of the pride and joy in his chest, now that he saw the cultivators of the celestial sect retreating, he felt unhappy in his heart. In fact, he had already been guarding the rear for a day. While slowly adjusting and adapting, he watched the development of the battle. At this critical juncture today, he also knew that if he lost again, he would definitely retreat all the way to Cloud Mountain. Now that the cultivators of the celestial sect had come out in full force, if they were defeated at the foot of Cloud Mountain, the saints would have to appear and turn the tide. But when that time came, how could the saints appear? Therefore the decline had to be stopped here. Su Yusong frowned and said to Zhuomuja with his divine ability, "You and I should try not to fight anymore. There are many mystic realm cultivators here, and a few of them are at the peak of the mystic realm. After all, we only came out for a day. I'm afraid of trouble." Zhuomuja naturally knew what he meant. Any cultivator of the celestial sect who cultivated to the true state or the mystic realm had an extraordinary understanding of divine abilities. Now that the two of them had only come out for a day, they still could not master all the divine abilities of spiritual power. The more power they showed, the easier it was to be noticed. After all, the peak of the mystic realm was only one step away from the grand supreme realm. Although this step was as difficult as ascending to heaven, the two of them had not taken it. In terms of understanding of Tao, they might not be as good as a cultivator of the true state. So Zhuomuja snorted, "Fine. But I still have to take a look first. How is the divine ability of the Sword Saint? It will also boost the morale of the people and destroy the prestige of the demons." As she said this, her gaze fell on the ground. There were many cultivators on the ground who had not reached the transcendent state. These cultivators had the most casualties, but they were also the most spirited. Now that they saw the saints enter, their spirits were much higher than the cultivators with higher cultivation levels. They regarded the two saints as gods. Now that they were bathed in the spiritual power of the two saints, they felt comfortable all over and were seriously adjusting their breathing in order to counterattack the demons. Zhuomuja's gaze swept across these people for a while. Suddenly, he raised his hand and said, "The three of you, which sect are you from?" When the saint spoke, her voice was clear and ethereal. Almost half of the battlefield could hear her. There were originally nearly 1,000 cultivators on the ground, but now that she pointed at three of them, the three of them immediately raised their heads. It was as if they could sense it and knew that she was talking about them. And these three people were not eye-catching among the many cultivators. They could even be said to be in a sorry state. They were 2 men and 1 woman, 2 young and 1 old. Chapter 484. They were all Kenzo cultivators. The old man was the most severely injured. There was a horrifying wound on his chest. His skin and flesh were torn apart, revealing his organs. He was leaning against a giant demon beast's corpse and meditating. A mortal would have died a long time ago from such an injury. However, he was a transcendent cultivator. He would not die immediately. He was saved by his fellow cultivators. There was also a young man in a green robe. One of his legs was crippled. It was bent backward in a strange posture. The bone was sticking out. But now he was also relying on someone, a young female sword cultivator. She held the male cultivator's arm with one hand and held a heavy sword with the other. From the appearance of the sword, it was obvious that the female cultivator was only an emptiness realm cultivator. She had never forged a flying sword before. The male cultivator also wielded an extremely long and thin sword. He seemed to be an emptiness realm cultivator as well. When the three heard the saint's call, they all looked up. They saw a ball of golden light in the air. It was so bright that they could not see the person's face. At this point, they could not care less about their lives and injuries. Even the old man struggled to stand up. He forced himself to answer, "Saint, the three of us are disciples of the Soaring Cloud Sword sect." Since the three were disciples of a sect, the old man with the highest cultivation level was the leader. However, the old man was so agitated that his voice was trembling. He was almost out of breath. Zhuomuja asked, "What are your Taoist names?" The old man opened his mouth. "I violated the rules of the sect and had my Taoist name taken away. My junior brother and junior sister. Our sect leader, Wei Liaozi, had gone to the Li Kingdom to kill a demon. Unfortunately, he was killed, so my junior brother and junior sister were not given a Taoist name." When Zhuomuja heard this, he sighed softly. His voice was heard by everyone. "So, you should be more than 120 years old, but you are still in the transcendent state. It would be difficult for you to advance further. But since you are in the transcendent state, your lifespan should be much longer than the mortals. Since you violated the rules of the sect, you should find a beautiful place to live. The two of you are younger. The path of cultivation will be more difficult. But today, how many children like you have died on the battlefield? Compared to those big demons, you all look so tiny." As she said these words, a huge horned eagle on top of the rolling fiery clouds let out a long and angry cry in her direction. On one hand, it was because it had just received an attack from a few cultivators who wanted to kill the elephant monster's remnant soul, and on the other hand, because of the Sword Saint's words, it immediately flew over to show off its power. The true form of this huge horned eagle was like a cloud that blotted out the sky. Perhaps a single feather on its body would be able to lift all three cultivators. It was indeed very small. At this moment, there were many giant demons like this horned eagle that appeared on the fiery clouds. Compared to the two sages, they were not much weaker. Wuxia saw the ferocious look of the fiendish demon, but his expression did not change. With a flip of her wrist, a gentle force lifted the three of them up and slowly brought them before her and Su Yusong. Since the two of them had transformed into imperial lords, they were over 100 feet tall. The three cultivators slowly rose in front of her. When they stood up, they were only the size of one of her eyes. They looked like three mortals worshipping a giant statue on a cliff. Wuxia continued, "But no matter how small a person is, if he has awe-inspiring righteousness in his chest and moral responsibility on his shoulders, he can be like the three of you. Facing a strong enemy, fighting to the death, and facing death without a change in expression. This is the true meaning of Sword Dao, the unparalleled sword intent that presses forward with indomitable will. Since the three of you don't have Taoist names now, I will give them to you." When she said these words, the cultivators let out exclamations that sounded like a passing wind. In the tens of thousands of years of history of the Shenmen, had anyone ever been given a Taoist name by the sages? Not even one. The three cultivators were so surprised that they forgot to speak. Wuxia continued, "According to your seniority, the three of you will be called Sword Heart, Sword Soul, and Sword Soul. Now that you have been given Taoist names, there is one thing you need to do." Wuxia raised his hand and pointed at the fiery cloud. "The primogenitor sages have already killed the three demons, but their remnant souls are still alive. The three demons have countless cultivators' lives in their hands. How can we let those evil creatures escape? The three of you, kill the remnant souls of the three demons as well." When she said this, the demons on the cloud laughed. The laughter only reached them after a long time, and it sounded like thunder. The three cultivators looked at each other, not knowing what to do. But in the next moment, three sword lights suddenly appeared in Wuxia's palm and went straight into the bodies of the three cultivators. Then she shouted, "Go!" The three cultivators, who were originally seriously injured, suddenly received the spiritual power of the sages. Immediately they were like old trees in the spring, glowing with astonishing vitality and vigor. Not only did the injuries on their bodies immediately recover, but even the swords in their hands became golden, as if they contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. As soon as the word "go" was said, the swords in their hands jumped into the air with a buzz, like vertical poisonous snakes. It seemed like the flying swords were sent by the three cultivators. Then they turned into three lightning lights and went straight to the top of the cloud. Seeing this scene, the demons became vigilant. They knew that although the three swords were sent by three insignificant cultivators, they were in the hands of the sword sage, who dared to take the sword sage's swords lightly. Therefore, for a moment, wind and clouds surged above the cloud and mystic lights flashed. All the great demons used their supernatural powers. It was not that they had to protect the three remnant souls. But, the sword sage's words just now were obviously to boost the morale and regroup the hearts of the demons. Now, if the cultivators of the one transcendent realm and two emptiness realm really killed the remnant souls of the great demons of the profound realm, wouldn't it be a great humiliation? But, the three golden swords only flew for less than a breath's time under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Then with a bang sound, three balls of fire clouds burst out and disappeared in the air. While the demon kings were wondering, they suddenly heard a sharp sound that made their teeth ache from behind them. Then, three balls of violent hot wind suddenly spread out. Not only did it blow many huge demons to the side, but it also blew away the fire clouds, thunder, and wind above the demon army. The wind blew all the way to the demon soldiers and demon generals below. In the blink of an eye, thousands of people were swept away. That wind was because the remnant souls of the three great demons were blown away, and the demonic power erupted. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the three golden swords actually scattered the remnant souls of the profound realm demons in the hands of three low-level cultivators. First, the book sage killed the three demons, and the three demons had no power to resist. Then the sword sage killed the divine souls, and the demon kings also had no power to resist. After experiencing two consecutive blows, the morale of the demon army was finally low. Since the group of demon kings were blown away, they took the opportunity to fly to the back. Seeing this scene, the cultivators didn't need any more instructions from the sages. They also used their magical powers and charged forward. The three cultivators who were named by the sages almost rushed to the front, but in the blink of an eye, they were overtaken by others. But there were still some people who didn't go forward. Instead, they gathered around the two sages and didn't make a sound. There weren't many of them, only 20 to 30. But after losing these people, it would be difficult to deal with the great demons in the sky. They were the sect masters and sect masters of the heavenly caves and sects in the Mystic Gate. These high-level cultivators hadn't been possessed by the Freemasonry yet. Even though some of them realized that the current Mystic Gate seemed to have quietly changed, they didn't care much. And the feelings these people had toward the two sages of the Mystic Gate were different from those of the low-level cultivators. Perhaps they would also be in awe, but it was less in respect and more in fear. Because their feelings were already extremely indifferent. Most people didn't care much about the battle between the Mystic Gate and the demons. And the reason why they came to the battlefield and fought bitterly for 3 days and 3 nights was purely because of a very simple reason. The two sages were the leaders of the Mystic Gate. Since it was the leader who gave the order, then whether they were willing or not, they naturally had to obey. So they came to the battlefield. Since they had come to the battlefield, those true realm and mysterious realm demons were unmatched, so they naturally had to stand up and fight. It was only because this matter had to be done by them. In fact, the price paid by these cultivators was far higher than the low-level cultivators on the ground. 3 days ago, there were more than 40,000 cultivators below the true realm of the Mystic Gate on the battlefield. Until now, there were only 30,000 people left. Nearly a quarter of them had died, 10,000 people. But these sect masters of the heavenly caves and sects were also in the true realm and mysterious realm. Originally, there were nearly 60 people, but now there were only 30 or so left. Although the 20 or so people who died were insignificant compared to the 10,000 people, they accounted for nearly half of their total number. And now, some of the high-level cultivators who led the heavenly caves, sects, and sect masters to the battlefield, but the leaders of the heavenly caves and sects stayed behind. Because the saints were here. Saints not only meant realms but also a kind of honorific title. This generation of Daotong and Kenzo, because of the concealment of the celestials, seemed to have withered. There were only 2 grand supreme cultivators. But many years ago, when the Mystic Gate was at its peak, there might be as many as 6 or 7 grand supreme cultivators in the same generation. Cultivating to the grand supreme did not mean that one was a saint. The Tao Venerable Saint and the Sword Venerable Saint were 2 honorific titles, which were given to the virtuous. It was just that in this generation and the previous generation for thousands of years, Daotong and Kenzo had only 1 saint each, so the cultivators converged the Grand Supreme and Saint. Thus, since the saints enjoyed honor, they also had to bear responsibility. In the previous 3 days, the cultivators might have thought that the saints had other important things to do, or that the time to take action had not come. But today, 2 saints had entered the battlefield and killed demons to boost morale, which meant that the Mystic Gate had indeed reached a very dangerous situation. At this time, the sect leaders and sect leaders thought that it was time for the saints to take responsibility. These high-level cultivators did not have the courtesy of mortals, and those wandering souls were even colder. Ku Chanzi flew in front of the 2 saints, not saying a single word. He first bowed and then said in a deep voice, "The situation is not good for us and there are many casualties in the sect. If this continues, the Mystic Gate will lose a lot of vitality. We have been fighting for 3 days, and the saints have finally come." He took a deep breath. These demon armies are led by the 8 dragon sons. However, the dragon sun has not appeared for 3 days, so there must be a terrifying plot. As long as we kill them, the morale of the demon army will be shaken, and we can also reverse the situation. For the 50,000 years of the Mystic Gate. He paused. The 30 sect leaders and sect leaders behind him also said in unison, "Saints, please immediately kill the 8 dragon sun with your divine abilities." Chapter 485. If a true sage was here, it would indeed be possible to kill the 8 dragon sun with magical power. But the problem was that they were not real sages. Su Yusong and Zhuamuxia had a quarter of the power of a sage, but in fact their real strength might be even weaker. The Taoism was so mysterious. The 2 of them could not fully exert this power. For example, between 2 strong men of equal strength, the one who was proficient in martial arts and the one who knew nothing about martial arts were 2 completely different concepts. But even so, Su Yusong believed that if the 8 dragon sun attacked together, the possibility of him killing them in an instant was very high. The problem was, these sect masters and sect masters seemed to be talking about something else. At this place, at this moment, immediately using magical power to kill all the 8 dragon sun in an instant. And their expressions were solemn, without the slightest intention of making things difficult for them. It was as if they thought that this was extremely easy for the Grand Sage, like it was a matter of lifting a finger. This was something that Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia could not do at the moment. Not only could they not do it, but they could not even think of any possibility to achieve this goal. Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia frowned slightly and looked at each other. Because the two of them also realized another thing. The sect masters and the sect masters said that the dragon son must have a terrible plan. The two false sages had been imprisoned in Mount Shaoyin for many years. Usually, except for wandering souls, they had rarely seen real cultivators. It was also for the same reason. They did not want to give themselves away because of frequent contact. But it did not prevent them from knowing another thing. These high-level cultivators were very serious when they spoke. They had abandoned their emotions and had already stripped away many of the feelings that normal people in the secular world should have. This made it difficult for their words to exaggerate, speculate, threaten, and the like. Many things that came out of their mouths were indeed like that. So now that they said, "must have a terrible plan," in front of the battle, it meant that they confirmed this in their hearts. Naturally, Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia were certain of that. Even if the true dragon, who was also in the Grand Supreme level, guarded the place, the demons would not be so stupid as to attack Cloud Mountain with such a force and all kinds of schemes. In fact, the Dragon Son's wish was for more demon soldiers and generals to die, so that they could take their souls and use them. As far as the two of them knew, this was Long Sun's real, terrifying scheme. It was just that the headmasters and sect masters didn't know about this. So they thought that there must be a terrible plot. So, at this moment, the two pseudo-saints did not take their words to heart. Since they could not do it and did not want to do it, Su Yusong's Zenith Green Great Emperor spoke. "I know what you are thinking. But I can't do this right now." Since he had spoken, the cultivators could only listen quietly. "This time we'll defend while the demons attack." The purpose of this battle was not to defeat the demons, but to ensure the safety of the Cloud Mountain. The reason why the two of us came here with our incarnations was to leave our true bodies on Cloud Mountain to prevent the fiendish demons from causing trouble. Moreover, among the fiendish demons there is also the Shinryu. Now that the two of us have appeared, but the Shinryu has not. If the two of us go into battle with our Taishang cultivation, the Shinryu will not sit idly by. The battle between the Taishang happened once 1,000 years ago. The Shinryu today is different from the one 1,000 years ago. It is the ruler of all the fiendish demons in the world. In this battle, if the two of you were to fight, the worst outcome would be the destruction of the people, and the Mystic Gate would be heavily damaged. But if the Taishang cultivators were to directly participate, the so-called destruction of the people is already the best outcome. The worst outcome is more likely to be the destruction of the world's Tao. Thus, the two of us came here this time only to raise the morale and stabilize the front line. The two previous attacks were already extremely risky. Killing the Dragon's son, this cannot be done. Su Yusong paused for a while. Because I have already sensed that there is a powerful force hiding nearby. The powerful force he mentioned was referring to the Shinryu. He did not know if the Shinryu would come here, but if he did not know, the cultivators would not know. This was enough to provide a sufficient reason for him to not make a move. But, in a short period of time, what made his mind move again was, hearing the words, "There is a powerful force hiding nearby," the faces of the cultivators actually had a look of understanding. Looking at this expression, it should mean, as expected, the sage has already sensed it. It was as if these sect masters and sect masters also knew about this matter. However, just like the previous terrifying plot, Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia did not pay attention. If it was in the past, such a move would not have escaped their eyes. But now, an incomparably powerful force filled their bodies. The two mortal consciousnesses had such power, and they could not face it calmly like those heartless cultivators. They were too happy, too proud. They were momentarily disoriented by the intensity of these passions that occupied their minds and paralyzed their consciousness. Therefore, after Su Yusong said these words, many sect masters and sect masters were silent for a while, and then Ku Chanzi spoke again. "Since the sage has already expected all this and seems to be prepared, we will not say more. It's just that, although our morale is high, our strength is still insufficient. Does the sage have any way to deal with it?" Hearing this, Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia finally heard some other meaning. These sect masters and sect masters seemed to have a different idea about them. Perhaps it was because the two sages had shown great power after entering the scene. However, this kind of power was relative to the low-level cultivators and the two wandering souls who had never had such an experience, but in the eyes of the sect masters and sect masters who had cultivated for hundreds of years, it seemed not like the means of the sages. Or perhaps it was because Su Yusong had previously ordered Ku Chanzi to capture Bai Yunshin and Red Lady. And after that sect master faithfully performed his duty, he found that the two important people he had captured had disappeared, so he became suspicious. Or perhaps it was because of some other inside story and details that only the true cultivators of the celestial sect knew, but the wandering souls did not realize at the moment. Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia found that their previous appearance and attack seemed to have become a failure in front of these sect masters and sect masters. In fact, in terms of Taoism. Now, these two wandering souls could indeed be considered to be showing off in front of experts, in front of a group of profound realm and true realm experts. But after all, it was the desire of Mount Chuyun that had been suppressed for 1,000 years that made them neglect many things, resulting in the current situation. Since he had noticed such a subtle thing, Su Yusong said in a deep voice, "Do you want to see how to deal with it? I do have a way to deal with it here." After saying this, he turned his palm. Suddenly, a small person with angry eyes appeared in his palm. This is the 9th dragon son, known as the Wei River Dragon King. Su Yusong said calmly, "Previously he also killed many cultivators of the celestial sect, and I believe you have all heard of it. Now, I have killed this demon in front of the formation. Do you think it can boost the morale of our army?" When the two fake saints said those words, the Zither Lady and Hatred were still standing on the Black Tower. From here, the huge figures of the demon kings in the distance could be clearly seen, as if they were just a dozen steps away. And the demon soldiers and demon generals spread out like a vast ocean with no end in sight. They could not hear the words of the fake saints from here, and the appearance of the fake saints was only a blurry golden light. But demons also had their own mystical abilities. In front of the two of them, there was still a mirror that the Zither Lady had created previously, so the two demons could clearly see the scene in front of the formation. Thus, when she saw Li Yunshin appear in Su Yusong's hand, the Zither Lady sighed in relief. She looked as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. "We guessed right," the extremely beautiful demon said softly. "There is indeed something wrong with the two saints. This also proves that Zhang Jingzhong was telling the truth." Hatred frowned slightly. "I did not expect it to be like this. The two saints have not come out for 1,000 years. I originally guessed that there was a problem with the tribulation, or that they had already ascended, but there was no new saint in the celestial sect, so I hid the news. But no matter what, I did not expect that they had been possessed." "Humph." The Zither Lady sneered. She had always looked gentle and calm, but this kind of sneer was very rare. "In my opinion, those two wandering souls do not know their own limits, and their previous cultivation level was not high. The two attacks just now looked very impressive, and it is indeed not something that you and I can do, but we still gave ourselves away. What kind of cultivation level is a Grand Supreme Saint? Their methods are no longer within the scope of spiritual power and power. It should be to overturn the Tao and regulations of heaven and earth. As for those two, they were like children wielding peerless godly weapons. They could cut through gold and jade at will, but in the eyes of an expert they could tell at a glance that the swords did not belong to them. But, with spiritual power far inferior to that of the Grand Supreme Realm, they displayed the methods of the profound realm. They are even inferior. If you and I can see it, the sect masters and sect leaders of the Paradise sect should also be able to see it. Moreover, they have been on Cloud Mountain for so many years, they should be able to notice more clues." "If that's the case," she paused. "Zhang Jingzhong is also right, we can try to attack Cloud Mountain." When she said this, her tone was not agitated, nor did she have an awe-inspiring expression. But it stirred people's hearts more than any heroic words. They felt that since she said it, she would definitely do it. Hatred was silent for a while. "For the treasure on Cloud Mountain that can make you the lord of the demons?" The Zither Lady laughed. "Do you believe that such a treasure really exists?" Hatred was startled. "Young Dragon Master, you mean, I believe that there is a very important thing, but it won't make you the lord of the demons. Otherwise, why would the celestial sect fight with us like this? Second brother, think about it." He raised his arms in the wind, and the strong wind caused his robe sleeves to flutter. "The two saints have not appeared in the world for 1,000 years, and now we know that they have become puppets. What about Shinryu? They have also slept for a long time, and they have also avoided the world. You and I have gone east several times in the past 1,000 years to find out the truth. But Shinryu has never shown up. But now that we know the situation of the two sages, I also think, since Shinryu is also acting strangely, could it be that she is afraid of something?" The Zither Lady turned to look at Hatred. For example, the thing on Cloud Mountain is not able to make a person the lord of the demons, but to deter our current lord of the demons. That is why she has not dared to act rashly in the past 1,000 years. What he said was not strange, it was within reason. But when it came to a matter that was within reason, there were many conjectures. His words were actually not of much use. Therefore, Hatred gently shook his head. Young Dragon Master's guess is reasonable. But it is still a guess. So we have to look at Cloud Mountain. Second brother, the Zither lady looked at him meaningfully. The demons are not the celestial sect. Many of us have forgotten what it was like in the past. In the past, the demons only dared to live in the mountains and forests, trembling with fear. If there is any movement, the celestial sect will come to eliminate the demons. Until the Golden Rock King and then the Shinryu King. Until now, the demons have flourished for thousands of years, but only for thousands of years. Compared to the celestial sect, it is but a fleeting prosperity. But even so, it's showing signs of decline now. The Zither lady sighed in the wind. The Golden Rock King has been sealed, and the Shinryu has been hiding from the world for a long time. The celestial sect is declining and so are the demons. But we can't withstand the same decline as the celestial sect. Now is a bad time but also a good time. If we can seize the opportunity, we can let the demons continue to flourish. Humanity flourishes, humph. If the demons also know about etiquette, humanity will not be able to compare. Hatred looked at the Zither lady in surprise. Young Dragon Master, what do you mean? At this time, the demons in the far distance seemed to be in an uproar. In the mirror in front of the two, a mysterious realm great demon appeared and asked the Zither lady from the battlefield hundreds of miles away, Young Dragon Master, what should we do? The great demon looked a little panicked, and the demons around him were also panicking, as if they had seen something strange. In fact, the great demon was speaking in front of the battle. Their demon soldiers had slowly retreated, and there was a wide open space between them and the Taoist priests of the celestial sect. The ground was full of corpses, most of them demons. They should be the corpses left behind by the counterattack from the calligrapher and the sword saint. This mysterious realm great demon didn't show his true form, but stood among the demons on the ground. It seemed that he was the commander sent by the Zither lady. What made him panic was not something else. It was a person in the palm of the great green emperor, who was shining with golden light in the opposite battle formation. But in fact he was no longer in human form. The ninth son of the dragons, a great demon who had attained the true Tao realm, Wei River Dragon King Li Yunxin, had shown his true form at this moment. The Zither lady in Hatred looked through the mirror. They could only see the image but they couldn't feel the spiritual power. But just by looking at him, they knew that the great demon of the dragons was like a lamp that had run out of oil. The Chiwen dragon was 1,000 feet long. But the Chiwen dragon in the palm of the calligrapher was only a few feet long. It was weak and powerless like a sick snake. Chapter 486. What made the Shen realm monsters in front of the formation, and even the other monsters panicked, was that the army was under the command of the so-called Shinryu, led by the 9 sons of Longjiu. But now the morale was already low, and the captured Longjiu suddenly appeared in the enemy's formation. If this Longjiu was killed in front of the monsters, and there was a saint on the other side, where would the morale be? He was probably going to break down immediately. After all, these monster soldiers and generals also had their own thoughts. Just like the 3 peak-level great demons that had been killed earlier, many of them had gone for the legendary treasure that could allow them to rule over a horde of demons. These monsters usually called themselves ancestors, and they didn't care much about the land and blood. What he cared about was just a bit of honor. Since they had such a strong power, they naturally wanted to try to see if they could go further. The Shinryu hadn't appeared in the world for a long time, and these monsters had long forgotten the taste of fear. Some of the more outstanding demon kings did indeed obtain land and blood for the sake of it. Although the Midland was big and there were few monster kings, the hunting ground of the monster kings was also very vast. Even though not much of the vast hunting ground belonged to them, and most of it was forcibly occupied by others, the nominal fiefdom was still full. For example, the Lord Tong Tian claimed to rule over 70% of the waters of the Qing Kingdom and the Yi Kingdom. Although he didn't really need to set up checkpoints, if someone really wanted to die came and said that this place was his, how could the Lord Tong Tian spare him? Therefore, these monster kings were very much like the unfulfilled sons of concubines in the mortal world who longed to obtain the fiefdom through military exploits. As for the monster soldiers with lower cultivation, they were easier to motivate. These small monsters were no longer ignorant beasts. They knew that human flesh and blood were delicious, and the spiritual power was strong. They also knew that there were many fun things in the world. But they didn't have the ability to use it for their own enjoyment. If they went out of line, they would be killed by the cultivators who walked in the world. These monsters were the most selfless and selfish. They really wanted to overthrow the Shen men and let the monsters be the masters. Only then could they enjoy the pleasures of the world. To them, what they had lost in this war was merely shackles and oppression, but what they had gained was a whole new world. It was these fiendish demons that followed in the footsteps of the dragon's son. They wanted to advance towards Cloud Mountain and accomplish an unprecedented feat, but now he was stuck here, and he even had to witness a dragon's son being killed in front of the formation. Demons were easily agitated, belligerent, and impulsive, but they didn't have much of a temper. That was why the Profound Realm demon was a bit flustered. The situation on the battlefield was originally good, and everyone's wish seemed to be coming true. How could it all be for nothing just because of Dragon's son? Thus, he hurriedly reported the matter to the young Dragon Master. However, their young Dragon Master, the young Dragon Master in the Black Tower hundreds of miles away, merely looked in that direction. Then he laughed coldly. It's little Nine. What was there to panic about? Now that Dragon Xiaojiu is dead, don't tell me you can't even hold your weapons anymore? Let's just watch. After saying this, he waved his hand, so only they could see and hear what was happening on the other side, but the two of them couldn't be seen in front of the formation. Then, Zither Master turned to look at Hatred and continued their conversation, as if the death of Li Yunxin was nothing more than a trivial matter to them. But in fact, it was. There were countless fiendish demons in the true realm in the hands of Dragon's son. But how many fiendish demons were there in the Profound Realm? You asked me what I mean. Zither Master picked up the topic and didn't care about Li Yunxin anymore. I know what you mean. You think I'm the same as you, that I'm here for the demon souls, human souls, and resentment, right? Hearing his words, Yazi frowned suddenly, took a step back almost imperceptibly, and asked the same question for the second time. What does young master mean? Zither Master smiled and shook his head. That's exactly what I said. I said, we'll set up a trap and trap both fiendish demons and cultivators. Then the profound gate will collapse and countless fiendish demons will die. Then we'll use the remnant souls and resentment to reach higher realms, right? Hatred frowned and didn't say anything. I also said, if you want to devour other brothers and sisters, I won't stop you. The Zither Master looked at him, but I often say something else, which I also said to Li Yunxin, that we brothers and sisters should love each other like a family, right? Hatred still didn't say anything. Zither Master slowly stopped smiling. But if I don't say this to you, how will you be willing to work together with me? The few of you want to reach a higher realm, to be able to protect yourselves. But I'm not thinking about myself. 3,000 years ago, when the Golden Rock King was born, the fiendish demons had a grand supreme realm. Although they are still oppressed by the Profound Gate, it's different from the past. 2,000 years ago, Lord Shinryu was born and conquered all the fiendish demons and almost unified the Midland. Some people say that this is the Dragon Dynasty, and I think it's true. But Lord Shinryu still has things to do. Zither Master looked at Hatred seriously. Unification is only in name. But I want to take the second step. To complete what Lord Shin failed to do, not only in name but also in real control. Hearing this, Hatred opened his mouth and suddenly realized Zither Master's purpose. Young Dragon Master, you? Hatred said in a low voice, you also want the lives of these demon kings. But you don't care about the remnant souls and resentment, but the fiendish demons themselves. Zither Master smiled. Exactly. I want them dead. It doesn't matter where or how they die. Only when these fiendish demons who don't listen to the Dragon God and won't sincerely submit to me die, can we make more space for our future subordinates. After this battle, the Profound Gate will wither, and the fiendish demons will also wither. But humans need a long time to cultivate, and the fiendish demons, in a world without the Profound Gate, if they have the willpower of millions of people, they will grow much faster than cultivators. At that time, the world will no longer be ruled by the Profound Gate, but by us. Zither Master looked at Hatred. Second brother, don't you want such a world? Hatred was silent for a while, then said in a low voice, I don't want. But why me? He also looked at Zither Master. Third sister is closer to you, why is she saying these things to me now? Zither Master pointed at him and then at herself. Although the evil lord and I are friends. But you should also know why I am friends with her. Because among the 9 of us, the evil lord and I are different from you. For example, you are the combination of the Dragon Soul and the Blood Wolf King of the Southern Red Flame Palace. so you also like fire. In the past, the little nine chi kiss was the combination of the dragon soul and the Lord Dongding's chi. So the little nine chi kiss looked like the divine lord. The other brothers and sisters are also the combination of the dragon souls and the demon kings of the Midland. But only the evil lord and I. Do you know where the other half came from? The origin of Cheonyo and the evil lord was indeed a mystery. In fact, there were many legends among the people. For example, the dragon and its first mate gave birth to Long de Cheonyo. With the wild wolf, it gave birth to Long Er Yazi. With the divine bird, it gave birth to Long San Chao Feng. With the toad, it gave birth to Long Si Pu Lao. With the lion, it gave birth to Long Wu Chi Ho. With the divine turtle, it gave birth to Long Lu Ba Xia and Long Ba Fu Ao. With the fierce tiger, it gave birth to Long Chi Ho. With the carp, it gave birth to Long Jiao. These legends slowly appeared among the people. 2,000 years ago, when the divine dragon conferred the 9 sons. It should be a method that the former Shinryu thought of to gather the power of faith for her 9 sons. Originally, it should have been more gentle and elegant. However, if this matter was spread among the vulgar people, it would eventually become unbearably vulgar. In fact, it was not that Shinryu gave birth to something, but the combination of the dragon soul and the demon king's chi. But these vulgar legends still retain the truth to a certain extent. For example, the demon king's chi in Hatred's body originated from a demon king who used to call himself the Blood Wolf King. However, the demon king who used to combine with the dragon soul, except for the recently dead Lord Dongting, the rest had all disappeared 2,000 years ago. There was a legend that Shinryu killed them one by one, to prevent the demon king from getting involved with Dragon Sun and becoming a threat in the future. The Blood Wolf King, the Toad Demon King, the Lion Demon King, the Carapace King, the Multicolor King, the Lord Dongting. These demon kings were all gone now. But only Cheonyo and Chao Feng. No one knew where the demon king's chi in Dragon Sun's body came from. According to the rumors circulating among the people, the other part of the chi in Guqin Jun's body came from the dragon soul. But other than the Lord Shinryu, how could there be other Shinryu in the world? And Chao Feng's demon king came from the divine bird. But no one had heard of the death of the feather demon king. Hatred shook his head. It's a mystery of 2,000 years, how would I know? Guqin Jun was silent for a while, then suddenly chuckled and looked at Hatred. Your third sister, although she does not have as many dragon souls as you and I, her cultivation is not inferior to ours. In fact, she is even stronger than you, almost on par with me. Don't you think it's strange? Hatred frowned. I don't want to jump to conclusions, Guqin Jun smiled. Actually, the reason is very simple. The more dragon souls there are, the stronger they are because the dragon souls come from the Taishang Lord Shinryu. When they fuse with other demon chi, not only will they not become stronger, but they will also be diluted and weakened. But what if the demon chi also comes from the Taishang? Hatred was stunned, then his eyes widened. Third sister is the dragon souls fuse with the Golden Rock King's chi. Guqin Jun said calmly. Because of this, second brother, third sister is different from you. You may be able to accept being by my side. Only one person is above all others. But third sister, our evil devil sister, will never accept this. Therefore, I can only talk to you about this, not third sister. Now, do you understand? Chapter 487. Hatred was silent for a while before saying, You understand now. Young Dragon Master wants to be the Dragon Master. Therefore, he wants to use this opportunity to wash the world with blood and create a new world. In his original plan, he might have planned to go to Cloud Mountain. Now that the situation is good, he really wants to go to Cloud Mountain to see what might exist and what might hinder the Lord of Shinryu. That's right. Hatred was silent for a while. Then where does young Dragon Master's other half come from? Zither Master was silent for a while too. I don't know. Hatred nodded. It was unknown whether he accepted this explanation or the fact that Zither Master didn't want to tell him. All right. He said, I don't have the same ambition as young Dragon Master. But it's also a good thing to be able to go far away. At this time the scene in the mirror changed again. In less than a quarter of an hour, Su Yusong, who had transformed into Great Emperor Extreme Green, also began to speak. He was speaking to the cultivators of Shenmen before the battle. Some of you should have heard of this fiend's name. But others might not know. Su Yusong's voice was clear, but there was a sense of calmness and solemnity in it. His incarnation shone brilliantly, surrounded by faintly discernible auspicious clouds and flowers, making him look like a god. But it also made the cheese kiss in his palm look even more dispirited. losing the imposing manner of the true dragons. Now I will let the world know what crimes this fiend has committed. He paused, raised his hand and tossed the cheese kiss into the sky like a rope. But it was still bound by a golden light, unable to move freely. Although the cheese kiss's body was only a few meters long, it could be considered huge for an ordinary cultivator. Now that it had left Su Yusong's hand and was in the sky, it immediately became restless. Some low-level cultivators pointed at him, so he gathered all his strength and opened his mouth. Immediately the scales on his neck stood up, his mane fluttered and his dragon whiskers flew. His eyes were as wide as copper bells, radiating a frightening murderous light. This ferocious look, combined with the power of a great demon in the true realm, not only shocked a large number of low-level cultivators in the surroundings, but it also made the low-level demon soldiers and demon generals further away lose their minds. They almost dropped the weapons in their hands. The pressure of the dragon's demon, even at the end of the road, was still so strong. How could these cultivators and fiendish demons withstand it when they were on the brink of death like right now? Su Yusong did not expect this. Originally they wanted to humiliate them to boost their morale. Who would have thought that not only would they fail to humiliate them, they would also be shocked by this demon? With a cold snort and a slight lift of his hand, the dragon's body rose a little higher from the ground. Only then did the low-level cultivators feel relieved. Humph. At the end of the road you are still so stubborn. Very well, all of you listen carefully. Listen to where this demon came from, what he has done, and what kind of ending he has now. It will also alert you invading demons. Is it worth it to come here and die for nothing? This demon is the ninth son of the dragons. His real body is Chiwen. His title is Wei River Lord and he calls himself Li Yunxin. He is a Jinren demon who has achieved the Tao. Originally he acted violently in Dongting of the Qing Kingdom and then stole our Xuanmen's treasure, the Bright Jade Scroll. Our Xianmen cultivators did not want to cause a disaster in the world, so we sent people to search for the treasure, but they were killed by this demon. We also sent a true realm cultivator to persuade him to turn back, but he was also killed by this demon. Since this demon has done such evil things he can't be left alive. That is why Kuan Wuxia of Langya Cave led people to the city of Wei to kill the demon. Who knew that the Dongting old demon in Dongting was in cahoots with this demon, colluding with many demons to secretly set up an ambush? Su Yusong didn't tell the truth. Instead, he dragged in many demons from other factions. Because if he told the truth, for example, that Li Yunxin's cultivation was originally sealed, but only Ling Kongzi who was at the peak of the transcendent state and had magic treasures. Then he became a transcendent state demon, but only Yunzi who was in the true realm and had a plan. Then he became a true realm demon, but the Shen realm master of Langya Cave led people to besiege him in the city of Wei. In the end, the Shen realm master of Langya Cave led people to besiege him. In the end, the Shen realm master of Langya Cave led people to besiege him. In the end, the Shen realm master died. If these things were said, how could it boost the morale of the demons? It would obviously boost the morale of the demons. But even though he said so, the earth-shaking noise in the field slowly became smaller and smaller. On the vast battlefield, there was a wind with the smell of blood whistling past. The dragon body of the true realm Chiwen struggled restlessly, but it seemed that his speech was sealed and he could not speak to defend himself. But by then many of these low-level cultivators would already know one thing. This guy killed Fairy Ling Kong, a rare genius in the Shenmen when he was in the transcendent state, and killed Jinren Yunzi who was in the true realm. Then, when he reached the true realm, because of him, a Shen realm master died. It was extremely difficult to make progress in the path of cultivation. Many times, those who had just entered the transcendent state would look up to the peak of the transcendent state for the rest of their lives. But this demon cultivated from the transcendent state to the Tao enlightened Jinren in just a few months. If he was not a killer, then he would be a fiend. How could anyone who got involved with him have a good ending? Hearing these words, many cultivators who were standing under him took a few steps back. It seemed that they would feel more at ease if they were further away from him. Su Yusong listed all the crimes of Li Yunxin in detail, and it took him a quarter of an hour. Finally he said, "Today I brought this demon to the front of the formation." What? As he said this, he suddenly heard a clear and sharp female voice exploding from the enemy's formation on the opposite side. Bulsh *T. Immediately there was an uproar. Someone actually dared to speak to the sage like this. The cultivators on the ground immediately shouted angrily, like a restless tide. Su Yusong had summoned the dragon's son. Although he had said many evil things that terrified these people, he had achieved some of his goals. to let them know that even such a ferocious dragon son had to be obediently bound. At least at this moment, Su Yusong's prestige in the hearts of these low-level disciples was unparalleled. How could they not be angry when they suddenly heard such rude words? But these people were angry, but the cultivators with a higher level were not angry. Not only were they not angry, but from their faces, appeared a little surprised and solemn. Because just by sensing the aura of the person who scolded him, they knew that he was very strong. Even if he was not at the peak of the Shen realm, he was not far from it. Also, they saw that in the ocean-like battle formation, there was suddenly a ripple. This ripple was formed by countless demon soldiers and demon generals. The newcomer swept past the demon formation. Wherever it went, the low-level demon soldiers and demon generals all prostrated on the ground in fear and awe, and the waves of prostrating quickly rolled to both sides. The demons had always been unruly, but now they made such a shocking move, which meant that the newcomer was a dragon with a strong and terrifying aura whose cultivation was close to the peak of the Shen realm. The first few great demons among the dragon's son had always been secretive, and the world knew very little about them. Only a few people had seen their true faces. Therefore, seeing the current battle formation, many high-level cultivators guessed that perhaps the mastermind behind this great calamity, Long Dichonyo, was here. However, when the newcomer slowly came into view and could be seen clearly, only then did they confusedly realize that it was not Longda. The one who came was an insufferably awe-inspiring female general. She had a slender figure. She wore a black robe and a brilliant silver armor. Her hair was not black, but it was dark with golden light, as if the sun was imprisoned in her hair. Her hair was tied up in a bun with 2 blades hanging down. It was not decorated with gold and silver hairpins, but with several small gold and silver swords shining with cold light. Her eyebrows were as thin as swords, and her bright eyes were more black than white. There were 2 vertical thin golden lines in her pupils, and her eyes were full of double pupils. The bridge of her nose was especially high, as if it was cut by a knife or an axe. There was not much of the elegance of a woman, but more of a fierce solemnity, and then there were the 2 red lips below. Just by looking at this woman's appearance and figure, one could feel a biting cold and murderous aura, as if a beautiful but dangerous Azura woman from the 9 hells of purgatory had come to the human world. Not only did people not dare to look at her directly, but they also wanted to run far away. Wherever she passed, dark clouds rolled and the chill was pressing. It was very strange. Look at her aura, her ostentation. Zhuomuja frowned slightly and spat out 2 words in a low voice. Fiend Lord. Then he paused. How can she be so strong? Isn't she Long San? Long San Xiaofeng titled Fiend Lord. Now that she appeared, she became the one with the highest cultivation apart from the 2 sages. Ordinary great demons had supernatural powers, but most of them were born with them. They were proficient in only a few, and the rest relied on the strength of their bodies. But the reason why dragons were the royalty of the demons was that dragons were born with supernatural powers that were far more than ordinary great demons, and they were more mystical. Maybe it was because of the fusion of 2 kinds of essence chi or some other reason. But such dragons also had a body that was far stronger than ordinary great demons. Because of the combination of these 2, a great demon dragons that were almost at the peak of the mystic realm was not something that ordinary great demons and cultivators could measure and speculate about. The Fiend Lord did not appear, but her voice arrived first. When she flew to the front of the formation in the air, the low-level great demons and soldiers around her were already prostrating on the ground. Her personality was like her title. Without saying anything else, she only smiled coldly and shouted, 2 cowardly old things hiding in the cloud mountain. You call yourself the 2 sages, but your mouth is full of nonsense. Tell Benjun properly, what you said before, was it all bullsh*t? Her voice was sharp and sharp, like the sound of swords and spears rubbing against each other, or like a sharp knife cutting gold and jade. It scratched everyone's eardrums, numbing their spines and sending chills all over their bodies. I heard that Li Yunxing killed your fairies, immortals and grand masters without anyone's help. He did it all by himself. That old fish from Dongting had already gone to the Lord of Shinryu in the east when Kuan Wuzi arrived at the city of Wei. Where did Li Yunxing collude with him? In my opinion, it's obvious that you are afraid that if you say this, your useless disciples and disciples will be even more afraid, so you made up this nonsense, right? I'm from the dragons, it's not a big deal if I'm defeated or killed. But you want to confuse right and wrong. Ask me first if I allow it. She said this in a stern voice. Before Su Yusong said anything, someone couldn't help but speak. It was a swordsman in the true state. This swordsman was lucky. He was at the peak of the transcendent state and he didn't pass the death trial. But on the battlefield, he relied on the heavenly weapon in his hand to kill many demons. He actually passed a fake death trial and luckily entered the true state. He just entered the true state, and his Taoist heart was not stable yet. He still had a lot of worldly feelings. When he saw the Taoist master and the sword master, he was already excited. When he saw the big demon dragons who were tied up, he was even more excited. Now, listening to the arrogant words of the evil lord, he had the state of mind of a low-level cultivator, but he didn't have the ability to see through the darkness like a high-level cultivator, so he was not afraid of anything. It was quiet in front of the two armies, but he broke through the air and shouted from the crowd, "Arrogant demon, you are the one who doesn't know death. Take my sword first." These words came out of his mouth, and his voice was like a big bell with extraordinary momentum. As he shouted, a ball of bright golden light burst out from his palm, but it suddenly went out. But it was not just the golden light that went out. Even his life force had been extinguished. It turned out that as soon as he said that, the evil lord raised his hand and pointed from afar without thinking. 3 light swords surrounded by lightning flashed in the air, and with a boom they tore the void and shot straight at him. When the evil lord attacked, there would be a profound state expert who was secretly on guard. It was the same principle as when the sage killed the demon king. The death of a new true state was not a big deal, but it was a matter of face and morale. The 3 sword lights shone and shuttled back and forth, and immediately intertwined into a big bright net in front of the true state cultivator. But, just like Zhuomujia's 3 sword strikes, the 3 rays of silver light suddenly disappeared in midair. The next moment, the body of the true state cultivator exploded with a bang, and even the hundreds of low-level cultivators around him were affected and blown into a bloody mess. This explosion not only destroyed his physical body, but even his remnant soul was not spared. The 3 silver lights did not slow down but turned around and left. Those profound state cultivators had already lost face because they did not stop it. How could they let the magic treasure of the demon escape? They immediately came to block it. It would have been better if they did not block it, but this time, the 3 silver lights immediately merged into one, rolling and making a heart-wrenching roar. It crushed all the treasures that came to block it into pieces. Everything happened in a few breaths. The 3 light swords of the evil lord instantly destroyed the true state cultivator in the enemy's formation, and destroyed the magic treasure of 3 profound state sword cultivators. This method was very similar to the method that Zhuomujia used to destroy the remnant souls of the 3 demons. If it was not a show of force, what else could it be? For a moment, the cheers in the demon formation were like thunder, and the profound gate was once again filled with blood. At this time, Su Yusong could not stay silent anymore. He snorted and said, "You demons are cheering for the great demon dragons, but do you know that you are just lowly animals in their eyes?" As he said this, he raised his hand and attacked fiercely in the air. The 3 silver lights that were still in the air suddenly stopped, and the light disappeared, revealing their original bodies. They turned out to be 2 horns and a silver feather. Although they were attacked fiercely and revealed their original bodies, they were not destroyed. After swaying in the air for a while, they returned to the palm of the evil lord like lightning. This Long San Xiaofeng took back the magic treasure and laughed coldly. "This is the method of the sage? In my opinion, it is on par with me." Chapter 488. Su Yusong was shocked. Who would have thought that the dragons who were almost at the peak of the profound realm could be so strong? Maybe the evil spirit lord was just mocking them when he said that they were on par with me. But in the ears of Su Yusong and Zhuomujia, they were really shocked. Just now, when he struck out with his palm in anger, he originally had the intention of destroying those 3 light swords, but he actually didn't destroy them. Only now did the 2 of them realize that there were so many people with terrifying cultivation besides the little cloud mountain that imprisoned them before. They knew about it before and had also expected it. But now that they saw it with their own eyes, they realized that what they thought and what they actually faced were 2 different things. Although the 2 of them were strong now, there was a limit to their strength. They were far from the level that a saint should have. Thinking of this, the lofty sentiments they had when they first entered the world and the pride they had when they cursed the 3 demon kings had slowly faded. Therefore, they realized that if they really wanted to fight against the 8th dragon son and win this war, they had to use their full strength. Go back to the cloud mountain, put the flesh and bones out, and bring out the full strength of the saint's body. But before that, they had to calm the morale of the army and make them continue to be in a stalemate. Therefore, they didn't care about arguing with the evil spirit lord anymore. They just snorted coldly, "Demon, I will allow you to talk nonsense. How would I not know what you are doing now? You are just putting on an act. The dragons, the 9 sons of the dragon, do they have the kinship that you mentioned? Do you know why the 9th dragon son is so weak? There is a restriction on his body. Right now, his physical body and divine soul were about to be incinerated. Do you know who planted this restriction? After Su Yusong said this, he paused like a storyteller. When everyone heard this sentence clearly, he said in a deep voice, "It is your good sister, Zither Lady Cheonyo. That eldest dragon even killed his own brothers and abandoned them in front of the array. Why would he care about the life and death of you demons? Today you appeared on this array, but it is just tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of medicinal herbs. What is nourishing is the cultivation of the dragons. They want to." At this point, the fiend demons should have been shocked, suspicious and unsettled. But all of a sudden, they all burst out laughing. At first it was the evil lord who was laughing. The majestic dragon lady in the demon array was stunned when she heard Su Yusong say "big sister." After Su Yusong said a few more words, he laughed as if there was no one else around. Her previous killing intent and coldness disappeared along with this laughter. It was as if she had heard some kind of joke in her own courtyard and was laughing only for her own family. As her laughter resounded in front of the 2 armies, the fiery clouds in the sky also let out thunderous laughter. The great demons on the clouds heard the fiend lord's laughter, so they laughed as well. The greater demon monarchs suddenly laughed out loud. The demons were naturally puzzled. But the demons, there were many simple-minded and slow-witted ones. When some of the idiots saw their leaders laughing, they laughed along with them. They didn't know where the laughter came from. As a result, it only took a dozen or so breaths of time. It was originally a murderous Azura battlefield, but all of a sudden, it was as if a deadly disease had spread in the demonic battle array. All the demons were laughing at the same time. Seeing this, not only were the cultivators puzzled, but even Su Yusong and Zhuamuja were shocked. They couldn't continue their solemn words, and the atmosphere that they had painstakingly created was swept away. After a few more breaths, the evil lord raised his hand and pointed at him. "You old fool. Big sister? Ah. You don't even know that Zijuan is a handsome man? You old fool, do you have a lover? If you don't know this, how can you know what my big brother Zijuan has done? How can you say such crazy things in front of the array? I've seen the Grand Supreme Saint of Xianmen today. Even though he knew that he was a fake saint, no one had ever said such things to him in the past 1,000 years. Even the elders on the peak of Cloud Mountain treated them as servants, but they still treated them with respect. Until a few days ago they were so angry that they slapped the 2 of them twice. 2 slaps. Thinking of this, Su Yusong finally felt a burst of anger in his heart. In fact, he had been hiding this anger in his heart for a long time. When he first got out of Cloud Mountain, he was high-spirited. After he killed the Demon King, his spirit reached its peak. Then, everything started to go wrong. First, the heads of the sects seemed to be suspicious of the 2 of them and wanted them to kill Long Sun immediately. At this time, half of his excitement was gone. Then the evil lord showed his extraordinary skills, which shocked him even more. He knew that his invincible power was not as strong as he had imagined. Then he wanted to finish these things and return to Cloud Mountain as soon as possible. He didn't expect that he would make a fool of himself. Not only did the demons' morale not weaken, but he was also laughed at in front of the array. Although the demons were stupid and cruel, they were still decent when they gathered together. When the evil lord showed up, all the demons worshipped him and no one dared to be rude. But what about his Xianmen? Those heads of the sects, or maybe it was his illusion, seemed to be waiting to see him make a fool of himself. Because of this anger, Su Yusong did something else in the end. His face turned cold and he pointed at Qi-Wen, who was in the air, and said in a deep voice, "Li Yunxin. Now there is an opportunity in front of you. If you take it, that evil lord is so arrogant. So what if I use you to teach him a lesson? If you take this opportunity, I will not only spare you from death, but also save you." When he said this, he was using his supernatural power so that only Li Yunxin could hear him. After that, he didn't wait for him to reply. Instead, he pointed again and removed the restriction that restrained him. What he was thinking was nothing more than, if he is obedient, I will make other plans. If he is stubborn, I will kill him as soon as he opens his mouth. As soon as the restriction was removed, Li Yunxin, who had turned into Qi-Wen, immediately returned to his human form. That Qi-Wen dragon form was not what he wanted. It was Su Yusong who forced it out with his supernatural power so that people could see that he was a dragon at first glance. Once Li Yunxin showed his human form, he fell straight down from the sky. He was like a lamp that had run out of oil. He didn't even have the strength to wave in the air. Su Yusong shouted, "Dragon Jiu Li Yunxin, tell me. Who planted the restriction on your body? And who was the one who clearly saw that you were about to die, but didn't save you? Although you are a demon, if you sincerely repent, I can let you be a divine beast to guard the mountain." At this time, the laughter in the demon formation gradually stopped. They were a bunch of stupid demons and they didn't know why they were laughing. Now that they saw something new, their spirits were all attracted. Just as Su Yusong finished speaking, the evil lord shouted, "Little Jiu, go, what are you waiting for?" After saying this, she suddenly opened her arms. Her two large black sleeves spread out like a pair of wings. Instantly, countless silver sword lights shot out like a storm and went straight to the back of Li Yunxin. This sudden attack was clearly seen by everyone. It was to help Li Yunxin retreat. At this moment, the cultivators of Xianmen also made their move. The cultivators who stopped the evil lord from killing the true realm were 3 profound realm sword cultivators. Instead, they were smashed into pieces by the evil lord. At this time, they didn't dare to be careless. More than 10 profound realm and true realm cultivators made their moves together. More than 10 flying swords and mystic lights shot out. Once they reached the sky, they divided into 10, then 100. They also turned into a violent rain of light and rushed towards the evil lord's sword lights. There was an open space in front of the 2 armies. Li Yunxin landed in the middle of it. Now, countless bolts of lightning, sword light, and mystic light were pouncing toward him from both in front and behind him. In an instant, the sunlight in the sky was obscured by the brilliance of these divine arts, as if it was a torrential rain composed of violent spiritual energy. However, Li Yunxin didn't dodge or avoid it. On the contrary, he stood up from the ground shakily. When he stood up, the low-level disciples of Xianmen shouted, "He wants to escape, and don't let him escape." As they shouted, they also used their respective divine abilities to stop him. However, Li Yunxin stood up straight. He didn't say anything and didn't take a step forward. Amidst the raging wind, he watched as the sword light and lightning from both sides came closer. He didn't know where he got his strength from, but he stomped on the ground and leaped into the air. He stood in the middle of the battlefield. Then he closed his eyes, raised his head and opened his arms. It was as if he couldn't wait to embrace death. No one expected him to do this. The evil lord screamed, but it was too late to stop. The supernatural powers of the cultivators of Xianmen were supposed to stop the evil lord's sword lights. At this moment he was too lazy to think about anything else. Therefore, in an instant, hundreds and thousands of lights rained down and covered the vast space around Li Yunxin. There was a series of loud noises. The lightning and the fire clouds filled the air. The air was distorted because of the surging spiritual power. Smoke and dust covered the sky between the 2 armies. After a dozen breaths, the sword lights and mystic lights disappeared. However, there was still one person standing in the air, Li Yunxin. He was still in the posture of seeking death. On this battlefield, there were many corpses of humans and demons who didn't want to die but died. Now Li Yunxin was seeking death. He was sandwiched between the sword lights and mystic lights of the evil lord and more than a dozen experts. But miraculously none of them hit him. Seeing this, the 2 armies were silent. They didn't know what to say. After a few breaths, the evil lord raised his voice and said, "Little Nine, what are you waiting for?" After a while, Li Yunxin slowly opened his eyes and put down his arms. Although he was fine, his hair was untied. His black hair hung down loosely. He looked desolate as if he was at the end of his rope. His white robe was also tattered. It fluttered in the wind, looking sad and stirring. He stared at the evil lord for a while. Then he slowly turned to look at Su Yusong and Zhuomuxia. Then he waved his sleeves in the wind and put them behind his back. He looked up to the sky and laughed. "I, Li Yunxin, can't live. It's also hard for me to die." His laughter was sorrowful. There seemed to be endless misery hidden in it. After laughing for a while, he turned to the evil lord and said, "Evil lord, 3rd sister. I've heard of your name before. I only thought that you were a vicious and cruel demon. I didn't expect that you would end up like this." After saying this, he sighed. "If I had met you earlier, I wouldn't have ended up like this. I, Li Yunxin, will remember 3rd sister's kindness." When he said this, his voice was low and sad. It was like he was saying goodbye. But soon he raised his voice again. 3rd sister wants me to go. Where should I go? I've fallen to this state. Who is forcing me? Who is forcing me? 3rd sister should have heard of it. But I don't blame anyone. I can only blame myself. I, Li Yunxin, am an unparalleled hero, but I was born at the wrong time. After saying this, he turned to look at Su Yusong. You want to give me a way out? How can I not know what kind of way it is? Although I, Li Yunxin, am down and out today, I still like to play some tricks. But if you think that I am a person who is afraid of death, you are wrong. Living an ignoble life, how can it compare to dying a quick death? When he said this, a desolate cry came from the Shenmen formation. Li Yunxin, why are you showing off at this time? Just do as senior brother said. This cry was not from anyone else, but from the wandering soul Xan Shilio. This little girl had sneaked into the formation and seemed to have been secretly observing for a long time. At this time, when she heard that he was willing to sacrifice himself for benevolence, she finally couldn't hold it in and cried out. Looking at her now, he saw that her body was covered in blood, and her previous beautiful appearance was gone. She stood among a group of low-level cultivators in a daze, holding a broken sword in her hand. There were many cracks on the blade. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes and looked at her. Xan Shilio cried and said, "It's all my retribution. I shouldn't have tricked you. But today I came to the formation thinking that if I died in the hands of the demonic beasts, it would be my revenge for you. But I didn't die." As she spoke, her tears flowed down, washing the blood stains on her face black and red. "But now that my senior martial brother has said so, just take it as me and live first. If you die, I don't want to live either." After saying this, she put the broken sword across her neck, and a thin red line was drawn. This little demon girl originally wanted to tease Li Yunxin, but she didn't expect that she would fall in love with him and couldn't control herself. She was a wandering soul with almost morbid paranoia, and finally did what she did today. As soon as she appeared and shouted "Senior Brother" twice, the faces of the sect leaders became more and more serious. Su Yusong and Zhuomujia's faces were even uglier. The master of calligrapher even stretched out his finger and almost touched the place where she was standing. Fortunately, Zhuomujia pulled him back, gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, "If you kill her now, it will be confirmed." As soon as Xan Shilio shouted, not only could she no longer use her identity as a spy of Munanju, but it also made the cultivators suspicious of the two sages. Su Yusong and Zhuomujia's love for her had almost turned into anger. It was only because of the situation that they did not kill her immediately. But even so, Li Yunxin just glanced at her. Then he turned to the evil spirit and said, "Third sister, Bai Yunxin and Red Lady are both in their hands. If you don't want them to have another helper, Golden Rock King, then find a way to save him." After listening to Li Yunxin's words, the evil spirit's expression slowly became serious. Now he was silent for a while and sighed, "You said you didn't see me earlier. How can I not see you? Among the sons of the dragon race, there's actually someone like you. Well, little nine, since you have become a member of the dragon clan, you also have the pride and bearing of the dragon clan, so third sister will no longer persuade you. Since you want to die, third sister wishes you a quick and vigorous death. After you die, I will definitely turn those two idiots into ashes as a sacrifice to your soul." Li Yunxin laughed maniacally, "I've traveled the world and got to know you before I die. I haven't lived my life in vain." After saying that, he suddenly turned around and pointed at Su Yusong and Zhuomujia. He said sternly, "Do you know that these two things were originally—" But his words stopped abruptly. The mysterious light that had been accumulating for a long time shot out from Su Yusong's palm. It contained all the power of the sage's skin. It struck Li Yunxin's body. The body of the formidable and unparalleled great demon, Li Yunxin, exploded into a rolling cloud of fire with a boom. Both her body and soul were destroyed. The fire was fierce and the sound was deafening. But before this, many high-level demons and cultivators had died, and the sound was much louder than this. Therefore, many low-level demons and cultivators did not feel that there was anything special about it. If they felt emotional, it was just because, in the past few days of fierce battles, it was rare to see such a generous demeanor. Moreover, it was a demon. But in the eyes of some big demons and cultivators who knew the inside story, it felt different. Li Yunxin, the cunning Li Yunxin who had escaped from death many times, the Li Yunxin who caused headaches for many people, could not escape death in the end. The evil spirit stared at the fire for a full 15 minutes. When it finally dispersed, only then did he realize that there were indeed no corpses or bones left. Everything had turned into ashes. At this time, another sound came from the demon formation. It was Xan Shilio who was at the peak of the transcendent state. When she saw the fire cloud, she fainted. The broken sword in her hand fell to the ground with a clang. But the sound was covered. Almost no one heard it and no one noticed her. because in the next moment, there was an earth-shattering cry in the demon formation. The evil spirit took the lead, and the other demons followed closely behind him. They rushed toward the Shenmen formation. No one knew whether it was the Xuanmen's morale or the demon's sadness. But the situation was finally out of Su Yusong and Zhuomuji's control. A bloody battle broke out again. The vast world was filled with fire clouds, lightning, poisonous fog, blood, and flesh. The two wandering souls gritted their teeth, sighed, and tried to escape. But at this time, they found that the sect masters and sect masters around them had turned to them. Two saint masters. There was no expression on Ku Chanzi's face, but his tone was solemn. My fellow Taoists and I have a question. Two saint masters, please solve it. Our third sister and our ninth brother are congenial. After listening to what the two of them said just now, my heart is somewhat touched. In the mirror, the two armies crashed into each other like two reverse waves, stirring up a monstrous sea of blood. Qin Jun stood in front of the mirror and watched quietly. When she saw Li Yunxin's figure disappear in the thick fire, she sighed and said this. Hatred was silent for a while and then smiled. It was hard to tell what he was smiling about. He only said, maybe they are congenial and have deep feelings for each other. Or maybe, she was in such a hurry to show up and run to Little Nine just to get the dragon soul. When Little Nine died, she was the closest. The dragon soul had nowhere to go. Even if it still had consciousness, it would be attracted after a while. So, I just don't know if she wants someone else's dragon soul after obtaining Little Nine's. Qin Jun looked at him and also smiled. Second brother, I think you're blinded by a leaf. You're thinking about the death of your brothers and sisters and the dragon soul. Don't you think about what Li Yunxin said before he died? Most of the dragon souls are in Red Lady's body. Hatred shook his head. How could I not know? But even if it's the young dragon master, do you dare to try? Before, we only knew that the dragon soul was immortal, but we didn't know that once Dragon Sun died, it would be attached to another person. I was the first example. It took me a long time to realize that Little Nine was in my body. And after a long time I slowly began to refine it. Speaking of this process, it was truly a difficult one. My body was stuffed with another person. Even now, I still feel numb when I think about it. This is because Little Nine's dragon soul is less than mine. If he had more dragon soul than me, I don't know who would be refining who. That Red Lady's body is said to be the core of the formation that Lord Shinryu used to suppress the Golden Rock King's formation. That level of dragon soul. I don't even dare to think about it. Zither Lady laughed again. I say Red Lady's dragon soul was not put into her own body. But, you and I both know that our third sister's fief is on the Tiansha cliff. We also know that the other half of her demonic energy came from the Golden Rock King. And now, that Red Lady is the key to unlocking the Golden Rock King, and Bai Yunxin found the map to the Golden Rock King's seal. Once our third sister gets these two, I'm afraid she can't wait to release the Golden Rock. At that time, I'm afraid there will be many more disturbances in this world. If she doesn't die, our new world will be in danger. Therefore first, Bai Yunxin and Red Lady must not fall into her hands. After saying this, Qin Jun suddenly raised his hand and erased the mirror in front of him. Those sect masters and sect masters are already suspicious of the fake saint. These two wandering ghosts are of no importance. Yet they insist on coming to the battlefield of kings. They are really courting death. I think, in a moment of desperation, these two will recall those sent out high-level cultivators who have been possessed by the wandering spirits of the Freemasonry. At that time, there might be an internal strife in the celestial sect. Since it's the right time, place, and people. The Zither Lady soared into the air, a brilliant rainbow light radiating from her body, and a huge illusory golden dragon formed behind her. It's time for you and me to make our appearance. Don't let down the good situation that ninth brother left for us. Chapter 489. The bloody battle between the demons and the cultivators of Shenmen was still going on. But, it was already tilting to one side. Originally, the cultivators of Shenmen could not hold on, but they could still retreat in an orderly manner. However, when Li Yunxin died and the battle broke out again, the situation became a little strange. Several Long Sun who had not shown up all this while joined the battle. Long Da and Xion Yo showed their golden dragon form, as if the Lord of Shinryu had come in person. Not to mention the small demons, even the big demons saw Long Da's real body for the first time. If they had not seen Gu Qingjun before, just by looking at the giant dragon hovering in the sky, roaring angrily and splashing down thick thunderbolts that seemed like it was going to destroy the world, golden scales and golden armor, bright mane, big eyes, coral antlers. It was said that the real body of Long Jiu was very similar to that of Shinryu. But now that they saw Qianyu, they realized that the real body of Longda was almost no different from the dragon in the folklore. The terrifying dragons joined the battle. On the other side, the number of high-level cultivators and Shenmen who were fighting the enemies had decreased a lot. A quarter of an hour after the evil lord led his army and charged forward, suddenly 6 or 7 beams of bright light shot out from the back of the Profound Gate army and into the distant sky. It seemed like 6 or 7 Profound Realm experts had escaped far away. Then, there was a loud explosion behind the battle formation. Rolling clouds of fire shot up hundreds of feet into the sky. Violent heat waves and shock waves immediately swept away a large number of cultivators behind the battle formation. This time at least a few thousand people had died. The situation in front of the battle formation was not good, and now there was such a disaster behind the battle formation. How could anyone continue fighting? The cultivators immediately retreated and scattered in all directions. They were hoping that the two saints would quickly make a move so that they could quickly turn the tide. However, after a dozen or so breaths of time, he looked again. 2 huge golden bodies suddenly rushed out from the rolling fire clouds behind the formation. Who else could it be but the Taoist master and the sword master? As soon as the 2 sages appeared, the cultivators who saw them were just about to jump. They saw the 2 sages pause in the sky for a while and then splashed fire rain all over the sky. He immediately fled far away. At this moment, all the cultivators who saw this scene were dumbfounded. They did not know how many of them had been killed by the demons. However, this was not the most surprising thing. What was even more surprising was that a dozen or so Profound Realm cultivators rushed up to the fiery rain and released all kinds of magical treasures from their palms. It went straight for the 2 sages. On this dangerous battlefield, at the rear of the battle formation, the sect leader, and supreme sage of the celestial sect were actually having an internal strife. Thus, the situation on the battlefield took a turn for the worse. The demon army advanced like a wave, and the celestial sect of Wonder soldiers collapsed like a mountain. Red clouds rolled in the sky and the sun dimmed. The day was about to end, but the war was far from over. After another half an hour, the sky finally gradually darkened. And so, a small shining silver triangle could be seen in the sky. It was Yunshan. Cloud Mountain had already entered the borders of the Yi Nation and was about to reach the Skyspan Swamp. When the long bloody night was over and the day came again, it would fall to the ground. By this time, the vanguard of the army had passed. This piece of land was originally a grassland. Before the war, the wild grass had already withered and fallen to the ground. Until now, there were still various colors of light, huge figures, and indistinct angry roars in the distance. But after a quarter of an hour, even these could not be seen or heard anymore. The demons advanced very quickly. This place, the place where the great demon dragons, Wei River Lord, had died, was quiet. Night fell. What was left were flesh and blood, broken bones, and shattered weapons and armor. They piled up on the ground in a thick layer, completely covering the ground. The blood had yet to coagulate. It seeped down along the layers of metal shards, flesh, and broken bones. Before Li Yunxin died, he rose into the sky. Before he rose into the sky, he heavily stomped on the ground and borrowed strength. The strength of the great demon dragons was so strong that with that stomp, he created a deep pit in the ground. Now that the pit was filled with flesh and blood, it looked like a pool of blood. Thus, no one could discover that at the bottom of this pool of blood, there was a copper nail. After a breath's time, the flesh and blood that originally covered the pit began to move. A moment later, a person covered in blood jumped out from the pile of flesh and blood. After landing, he crouched down and looked around like a wild beast. After confirming that there was nothing to worry about, he reached into the pit and scooped out the copper nail. Then he took 2 steps back, clenched his fist, and shook his body. All the filth on his body was shaken off. This person was dressed in white, his face was like a painting, his face was handsome and unparalleled. If it wasn't Li Yunxin, who else could it be? As far as the eye could see, the surroundings were completely silent. Not even the chirping of birds or insects could be heard. The stench of blood became thicker with the night wind, almost suffocating. And far away, very far away, a faint light could be seen. The faint light extended on the long horizon, as if the sun had appeared earlier than expected. But it wasn't sunlight, it was the mystic light of a battle between armies. The demons were advancing very quickly, and by the looks of it, they had already pushed to the end of the horizon. Li Yunxin's gaze retracted after a glance. Then he opened his palm and brushed the copper nail, taking out a white fan surface and 24 tiers bamboo fan ribs out of thin air. His slender fingers flew up and down, and the fan surface was attached to the fan ribs. Then he used the short copper nail to stab the bottom, randomly picked up a piece of iron slag from the ground, kneaded it into iron paste and stuck it. Before he and Lu Gongzan were attacked in Ziwei Palace in Junshan, the Tears bamboo fan, that he used to show off almost every day where his dragon palace was located, was formed. And looking at his actions, the process of making this fan from the fan surface, the fan ribs, and the copper nail, seemed to have been done countless times. Other than Li Yunxin, the only person who had personally touched this fan was probably the former head of the Ling Xiao sword sect, Ming Jinzi. That day, several sects joined forces and used the Nine Heavens Thunder to attack Li Yunxin. And Li Yunxin used the dragon palace formed by the power of his cultivation and the Tears bamboo fan to struggle, but in the end he couldn't resist the divine power of several masters and escaped with injuries. After he escaped, Ming Jinzi found the folding fan on the stone pillar where he had stood. At that time the bamboo ribs were also smoking and slowly turning black. But the picture scroll on the fan surface was intact. It can be seen that it is a treasure. Cultivators also knew about the demon's palace, the dragon palace and the like. They knew that it was a temporary refuge, and it was far more solid than the demon's body. Therefore Ming Jinzi said that the fan surface had not been destroyed even after the great calamity, so it could be seen that this extraordinary thing must be that Li Yunxin's palace. The demon Li Yunxin mounted the palace on the fan to deceive people. Others thought that the whole fan was the palace, but in fact the fan surface was. This should be the cunning demon's careful thought. The most eye-catching place was actually the most inconspicuous place. But if immortal Ming Jinzi knew more about the past of Li Yunxin, he would probably think more deeply. For the big demons, the palace was an incomparably secretive, offensive and defensive existence. Whether it was the Zither Master, Lord Tongtian, the Evil Lord, or even Bai Yunxin, Red Lady, no one had ever seen where their palace was or what it looked like. But this Li Yunxin, who had always been known for his deep thoughts, waved a folding fan in his hand every day after possessing Qi Wen. He never avoided taking people and things into the fan. As if he was afraid that others didn't know that his fan was his palace. Maybe it was because the people around him were really used to it, so he didn't find it strange. Coincidentally, the surface of his folding fan was a spiritual map made from millions of ghosts released by Yanjun that day, which painted the rivers and mountains within a radius of 100 miles around the city of Wei. There were only a few of such painting treasures left in Xianmen. Since it was a spiritual treasure, how could it be ordinary? Naturally, it couldn't be destroyed by weapons. Ming Jinzi saw this thing, and felt that he already knew Li Yunxin's careful thought of deceiving people, so he naturally thought that this fan was his real palace. But in fact, apart from the fan surface and the fan frame, there was also a fan nail. If Ming Jinzi could live to that night after Li Yunxin killed the golden photon, hid in the light shield of the glazed sword heart, and talked with Su Sheng about the incarnation of the spirit while drinking, and saw the scene at that time and was careful enough, he would probably think more about it. Maybe it was because that night, Li Yunxin finally killed a very difficult opponent and took his revenge. As a result, he was agitated and made mistakes in his actions. He took out a pot of Mu Nan Chun from his sleeve and drank it. Even earlier, when he met Su Sheng in a tavern near the Allied army camp, he had crushed an identical silver wine pot and tossed it to the boss to be used as money. Mu Nan Chun was the signature wine of Mu Nanju. If he didn't buy it in the city of Wei and hide it in the palace, where could he get it? Unfortunately, Ming Jinzi had already died in the battle when Li Yunxin first met the golden photon in Changji town at the border of Qingye, so he couldn't care about these things after his death. In this world, probably no one would know. This nail was the real location of his dragon palace. After installing the fan, Li Yunxin opened it with a swish and shook it in front of him. Now he looked very energetic and his appearance was also very good. Like a newborn baby, everything was new and tender. But being energetic didn't mean that his body was also good. If someone had seen Li Yunxin after he took over the body of the ninth young master, they would realize that their current situation was very similar. He still had the realm of enlightened Jinren. But the demon power in his body was very little, almost equal to that of a demon soldier. But he didn't seem to panic. He looked up at the night sky for a while. Then he saw that Yunshan hadn't fallen yet. But the huge figure was already visible and even the outline was clear. After Su Yusong brought him out of Yunshan, he first stayed behind the array and observed for a period of time. Maybe he thought that he would die, so he didn't hide some things from him. So Li Yunxin knew that the guards on Yunshan weren't very strong. There were only 4 enlightened Jinren cultivators guarding the 4 sides. The rest were all low-level disciples. But the protection around Yunshan was very tight. In Su Yusong's words, even a mosquito couldn't fly over quietly. Secular people were exaggerating when they said that. However, it was indeed possible for cultivators to say such things. But he wasn't in a hurry. He walked a few steps away and found the corpse of a demon beast. He couldn't tell what it was, but it had huge scales that were as big as a table. He opened his folding fan and placed it on the table. Then he swiped the fan and a green iron chain appeared in his hand. It was none other than the judge's lock that Bai Yanjun gave him, which specialized in capturing souls. Then, Li Yunxin wiped his eyes. The world in front of him suddenly changed. It used to be an empty and lonely grassland, but now that he had opened his third eye, the grassland was filled with souls. They were none other than the souls of tens of thousands of demons and cultivators. Once those high-level fiendish demons and cultivators died, they would either be escorted away by their comrades, or they would be unlucky and be targeted by many people, causing their bodies and souls to be destroyed. But no matter what, they would leave this battlefield. Although the cultivators in the transcendent state hadn't reached the true state, they weren't weak. Even if they became remnant souls, they wouldn't stay here. Therefore, those wandering around the battlefield were the souls of demons and cultivators in the intent realm and the void realm. But even so, a great painter in the secular world could become an honored guest of the emperors, generals, and ministers if they could reach the void realm. The demons and cultivators in the mountains, not to mention the intent realm and the void realm, could already dominate the mountains and wreak havoc before they could transform into humans. The souls of these low-level demons and cultivators weren't eye-catching on this vast battlefield, but in the secular world, they were rare and powerful ghosts. One of them was equivalent to hundreds or thousands of ghosts. These demons and cultivators had low cultivation levels when they were alive. After they died, they became remnant souls, and their minds weren't as clear as those of high-level cultivators. They were muddle-headed and like walking corpses. Now that Li Yunxin had opened her eyes, she saw that these horrifying remnant souls were standing together, like many bloody tree stumps. There was no distinction between human cultivators and demon cultivators. Some of them wandered aimlessly, but when they bumped into someone, they would change direction and continue walking like countless headless flies. But they were extremely quiet and didn't make a sound. The wilderness had become a silent field of death. Li Yunxin knew that if he ignored these wandering souls, then after a month, a few months, or even a year or two, some of them would slowly gain intelligence and become ghost cultivators. But only 1 in 10,000 ghost cultivators would become ghost cultivators, and the road ahead would be even more difficult. They would no longer be their former selves. However, neither he nor the disciples of the dragon tribe would allow these remnant souls to stay here. They were cannon fodder in this war when they were alive, and after death they became part of the spoils of war brought by this war. But whether it was Guqinjun, Hatred, Su Yusong, or Zhuomuxia, none of them seemed to think that Li Yunxin was qualified to be one of the people who enjoyed these spoils of war. But now, he had indeed become the first person to cut off this plump and tender piece of meat. Li Yunxin raised the iron chain in his hand. With just a little bit of divine power, the iron chain suddenly expanded. As far as his divine sense could extend, the iron chain expanded. All the muddle-headed wandering souls along the way were locked up, and with another pull, they were all sucked into his fan. He had long been proficient in using the chain, and in a breath's time, he had cleared everything as far as his eyes could see. Then he turned his head to look at Cloud Mountain again and continued with his work. He collected hundreds of remnant souls, thousands of remnant souls, tens of thousands of remnant souls. When this long night was about to end, the wilderness that was originally densely packed with remnant souls was empty again. After doing this, he closed the folding fan again. But this time it was no longer a white fan. Numerous red dots appeared on it as if they were countless scarlet stars. It turned out that this so-called white paper was none other than the magic paper he used in Changji Town. At that time he found that there was a star formation hidden under Changji Town, so he copied it with the magic paper. The thin piece of paper had layers and layers inside, like a vast starry sky. This strange star formation had opened up such a vast space on a piece of magic paper, and now it was used as a shelter for these tens of thousands of remnant souls. After doing all this, Li Yunxin let out a long breath. Then he turned his palm, and the folding fan in his hand was smashed into the ground with a bang. Then he stepped on the bloodstains on the ground and slowly walked toward Tongtian Swamp. Now this was only the first step. It was a good start and he had obtained some results. But what he wanted was far more than this. more things were still on Cloud Mountain. But thinking of this, Li Yunxing couldn't help but frown. It didn't feel good to die at all. At the same time, Lu Gongzan was walking on a cold and damp stone path. Cloud Mountain was about to fall, and these criminals could no longer be locked in the stone chambers outside the mountain. When Cloud Mountain was in the sky, these cultivators who were below the transcendent state could not escape. But if they fell to the ground, even an emptiness state cultivator's body could support him to climb down from a cliff that was 1,000 feet high. Therefore they had to be moved to the prison inside the mountain. But now, Lu Gongzan's hands and feet were not shackled, and there was only one cultivator behind him to supervise him. This was because he was so weak that he didn't need any shackles. The last time Xan Shilio came to see him, half of his right arm was rotten. But now, his entire right arm was rotten. It seemed to have a high fever, and his eyes were dark and his lips were pale. He staggered as if he was walking on clouds. Behind him was a young sword cultivator. He was only in his 30s, and his cultivation level was also at the emptiness state. But he had a sword in his hand and his body was strong. He didn't need to worry about the criminals in front of him. He watched Lu Gongzan walk for a while and finally couldn't help but say, "Why do you have to do this? Working with the demons is no different from asking a tiger for its skin. What good will it do? You are the first person who can become so sick after cultivating to the emptiness state." Lu Gongzan didn't say a word and only walked slowly. The cultivator shook his head and sneered, "Do you know that there is a war outside? It's going on all over the place and the invaders are all demons. Let me be bold, if the demons are unfortunate enough to break into Cloud Mountain, do you think they will let you go? I'm afraid they won't even bother to ask and will twist your head off." But Lu Gongzan remained silent, as if the person behind him didn't exist. At this moment, there was a buzzing sound coming from the stone path. The two hurriedly held onto the stone wall. About 2 or 3 breaths later, the sound disappeared. Lu Gongzan continued walking, and the emptiness state cultivator's face turned pale. The buzzing sound was not because of anything else. It was because of the battle outside Cloud Mountain. Another high-tier fiendish demon or high-tier cultivator had perished, and both their bodies and souls had been destroyed. Therefore, at the last moment of their lives, they turned into raging flames, and spiritual chi violently overflowed in all directions, causing a terrifying explosion. Even though the battlefield and Cloud Mountain were about 100 li apart, the remaining power of the explosion could be felt from the periphery of Cloud Mountain. After this experience, the swordsman was quiet for a long time. Until the two of them turned a corner in the stone path, he couldn't help but say, "People like you." This time Lu Gongzan spoke. As he walked, he shook his head. "What are you afraid of?" The swordsman was stunned. Then he said, "What did you say? You must be very afraid, that's why you want to keep talking. You want to belittle me to embolden yourself. But there are so many cultivators on Cloud Mountain, and you are hiding in the mountain. What are you afraid of?" Hearing this, the swordsman was stunned again. But then he raised his eyebrows, raised his sword, and smashed it on Lu Gongzan's face. "How dare you? You are about to die, but you still dare to be so stubborn. I'll let you see if I'm scared, scared and scared." His scabbard was made of badan wood, which was harder than iron, and both ends were covered with gold. There were also brilliant gems inlaid on it. After smashing on people, Lu Gongzan's head was bleeding. He leaned weakly against the stone wall, using his left arm to cover his face. Seeing him in such a cowardly state, the swordsman didn't say anything more, so he smashed a dozen more times and stopped. He stared at him. "Do you think I don't know who you are? You are a bandit working for that Way River Dragon King Li Yunxing, right? You look calm here today, but do you know that your master is dead?" Lu Gongzan moved his hand away and widened his eyes. Blood flowed down from his forehead into his eyes. But he didn't even blink. Dead? Dead to pieces. His body and soul were destroyed. Right in front of the two armies. The swordsman snorted again. "What else do you have to rely on? I'll kill you next." Lu Gongzan stared at him for a while, then looked at his right arm subconsciously and suddenly said, "Impossible? How could he die? Bah, you idiots, you can't even tell the real body from the fake one." He talked back and scolded, but the swordsman wasn't so angry. Instead, he laughed cruelly. "Can't tell? Even I, a cultivator in the emptiness realm, know that a spiritual master can cultivate the soul into the real body. You mean the dead one is an incarnation? Since I know this, why can't the sect leaders, and even sages on the battlefield tell whether the dead one is a real body or an incarnation? I'll tell you one more time. That Li Yunxing died in front of the two armies, in front of all the experts in the world. her body and soul were completely destroyed. Do you understand? After saying this, he kicked Lu Gongzan up. Keep going. If you provoke me again, I'll kill you with my sword. So Lu Gongzan remained silent. The two disappeared into the darkness at the end of the stone path. Chapter 490. The fierce battle lasted for an entire night. At one point, the front line of the demons was less than 50 kilometers away from Heaven Lake, but after 2 hours of fierce fighting they were pushed back. By the time the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, the front line had stabilized at a distance of 300 kilometers from Heaven Lake. Both sides left behind a large number of corpses, which were abandoned in the wilderness and left uncollected. But the intensity of the battle gradually decreased. Even the two armies, which were like demons and gods, gradually felt extremely tired. So at this time the cloud mountain finally began to descend. A huge shadow was cast by the rising sun from the east. It was as if the sky had been torn open and darkness leaked out during the day. The entire battlefield, as well as the land hundreds of kilometers away from the battlefield, was shrouded in the shadow of the cloud mountain. This made the morning seem like night. The huge cloud mountain was still hundreds of kilometers away from the ground, but everyone could already feel the pressure brought by its huge body. It was as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was hanging upside down, and the next moment, it would fall on everyone's head. Gray waterfalls began to fall from the cloud mountain. They fell extremely slowly, as if the cloud mountain was slowly growing roots. But in fact, the waterfalls were not water but dust. The dust contained in them was not fine sand. Countless stones the size of a head, the size of a millstone, and even the size of a house began to peel off from the cloud mountain, gathering into many rivers that fell from the sky. There were also thick clouds that were torn apart at the bottom of the cloud mountain, turning into thousands of strands that rose into the sky. But if one was close enough, they would realize that every strand of it was as wide as the Wei River. They were like countless tentacles that reached down from the sky, wrapping around the huge mountain and refusing to let it land on this dangerous land. The Zither monarch looked up at the cloud mountain. The latter occupied almost his entire field of vision from top to bottom, from left to right, and he could not see the end. He did not know if it was an illusion, but this great demon at the peak of the profound realm even felt that his body had become somewhat lighter. He had never seen such a huge thing. Thus, a certain thought burned even more intensely, causing him to slightly purse his lips. Before seeing the cloud mountain with his own eyes, his impression of it was only a mountain. A mountain floating in the sky was the profound ancestral court, the holy land in the hearts of all cultivators, and there were many treasures inside. That was all. He had even personally seen Yun Shan once. But that time, it was because Yun Shan was flying across the sky. He rose into the air and tried to catch a glimpse of Yun Shan's face. However, Yun Shan was flying at such a high altitude and was heavily guarded, so he only took a glance from afar. At that time, the cloud mountain in his eyes was not even as big as a fingernail, and he did not have any strong feelings. But now, the clouds formed a stark contrast with the earth, the mountains and the rivers. Such a behemoth? Apart from the factors such as the ancestral court of the celestial sect, it was only because of its size. To be able to capture it was already a primitive and incomparably strong temptation. This kind of temptation, the desire to possess and destroy, lurked within the bodies of every human and every demon. However, the number of fiendish demons far surpassed the cultivators. Therefore, when the cloud mountain descended, not only did more fiendish demons not feel fear because of the pressure, but instead, let out even more savage roars. After looking at it for a while, she shook her hand to get rid of the blood stains between her fingers. During the course of a single night, he had killed 7 profound realm cultivators, 19 true realm cultivators and none below the true realm. However, looking at him now, his hair was still in a neat bun, and there were no stains except for his fingertips. I must take down the cloud mountain. He turned to Hatred and said, now that I see it, I understand what is called an unprecedented feat. The high-level combatants of both sides had already retreated, leaving only the low-level demons and cultivators who were slowly fighting and retreating. Now, the two of them were standing on the back of the giant golden-horned hoe, facing the wind, looking at the endless battlefront and the huge mountain in the background. Hatred had just landed behind him, but he did not immediately answer his question. Instead, he frowned and said in a low voice, even the remnant soul is gone. He did not look as calm as Zijuan. Although the high-level fiendish demons could transform clothes and appearance, there was still a deep wound on the left side of Hatred's face. The wound was like a baby's mouth, and the golden flesh inside could be seen. This meant that the wound was on the soul and like a mortal, it needed time to slowly recover. If the soul hadn't recovered, the wound would directly reflect this in the form of a scar. He had just arrived from the rear. He landed behind Zijuan and said, then walked 2 steps to her side, "Third sister is too greedy." Zijuan seemed to be still immersed in the pride in her heart. Hearing his words, she only slightly raised her eyebrows and continued to stare at the cloud mountain. After a while she said, "Gone? I just looked behind and guess what I saw?" Hatred took a deep breath as if he was very distressed. "We advanced from the Black Tower to here, a total of more than 400 kilometers. Until now, the number of dead fiendish cultivators should be as high as 100,000. In the end, about 200 kilometers south of the entrance of the Yizhong Plain, at least 40 to 50,000 remnant souls were all gone. Say, other than Third Sister, who has the magical power to do this. I was hoping that, in the end, they would all be turned into wish power by the Guanyuan crypt. This was a very terrible loss, almost equal to the part that Hatred had originally obtained. But after hearing this, Zijuan was silent for a while and turned around. She first stretched out her hand to wipe the golden blood flowing from Hatred's wound. Hatred was stunned, but he didn't dodge. Zijuan gently wiped his wound with her thumb and said, "You think it was done by Third Sister?" It seemed that because of this action, Hatred's mood gradually eased. His voice was not as excited as before. "Who else could it be? I can't think of anyone who would have the guts to do these things behind our backs. Third Sister has already obtained Li Yunxin's dragon soul, but she is still not satisfied. Until now. Third Sister is not that kind of person." Zijuan wiped the wound clean, pinched Hatred's chin, and tilted her head to look at it as if to see how serious the injury was. Then she lightly sighed, turned around and put her hands behind her back. "You said that I was on good terms with her, and I was indeed on good terms with her. But the reason why I chose her is because our identities are special. Secondly, because she is very human. What she said to Li Yunxin on the battlefield in your opinion was for the dragon soul, but in my opinion it was sincere. Our Third Sister. This time there is only one reason why she came to help. The demons have been oppressed by Xianmen for a long time, and because of the old grudge of the Golden Rock King being sealed, she is here to seek revenge. She can't do anything else." Hatred snorted but didn't say anything. It was unknown whether he didn't want to refute Zijuan, or whether he felt that Zijuan's words made sense. After a while he complained in a low voice, "The dragon soul. I met her at the battlefield at night. I mentioned the dragon soul, but she pretended not to know anything. But if it wasn't Third Sister, who else could it be?" Zijuan was silent for a while, then flicked her sleeve. Immediately, a person fell out of her sleeve and sat on the broad and flat back of the golden horned hoe. It was the Deputy General of the Li Kingdom's floating army, Munenju, General Zhang. "General Zhang, tell me who did this?" After Zijuan asked this question, Zhang Jingzhong also slowly stood up, as if he was still not used to standing on the back of the huge golden horned hoe, and looked a little uncomfortable. It was like a man boarding a ship for the first time. He seemed to have heard the conversation between the two, and after getting used to it for a while, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Zijuan, please understand, I have always been under your protection. How could I have done such a thing? General Zhang is the Li Kingdom's General Zhang. Are you alone? Even if you mobilized all the forces of the Li Kingdom, it would be impossible to take away tens of thousands of souls in front of the 2 dragon sons' eyes without making a sound." Zhang Jingzhong smiled bitterly. "Even if we had such an idea, how could we do such a stupid thing when we are sincerely cooperating with the dragon son?" Zijuan turned to look at him. "Sincerely cooperating? Speaking of this, I have a question and I hope General Zhang can answer it for me. If you can't, I will ask General Zhang to be the main course of tonight's military banquet." Zhang Jingzhong's expression did not change and he only coughed twice. "I will tell you everything I know." "Very well. What I want to ask is, Li Yunxin has already died on the battlefield. You and I both know he is indeed dead. His body and soul have been destroyed, and there is no possibility of him surviving. So now that he is dead, don't you want to take revenge? You should know," Zither Master said slowly, "I also played a part in it. The restriction on his body was planted by me. I heard that you have given Li Yunxin a lot of help, and General Zhang has told me more these days. For example, your General Zhang has always wanted to form an alliance with Li Yunxin. Now that you have lost your ally, isn't it like drawing water with a sieve?" Hearing this, Zhang Jingzhong let out a sigh. "So that's what Zijuan is asking about. Speaking of this, it's easy to talk. He found a place to sit down and then let out a sigh. My General Zhang indeed appreciated Li Yunxin. To tell you the truth, the reason why Li Yunxin could reach this realm in such a short time is because of our help. For example, when he killed Jing Guangyan before he went up Cloud Mountain, we helped him mobilize the believers along the Wei River, and then he broke through to the level of a perfected spiritual master. But even earlier, my master had told him that this battle wasn't something he could participate in alone. If he wants to save his life or even gain something, he must form an alliance with us. However, Li Yunxin was unruly and spoke arrogantly. He said that this battle is a battle between nobles and he doesn't need any help. When the battle for the throne comes, then we'll see if he needs us. Hearing this, Zijuan and Hatred looked at each other. Hatred laughed, "Ha! That Li Yunxin is indeed arrogant." Chapter 491. General Zhang also smiled and continued, "So we let him be. But after this, we knew that he was not very reliable and was not an excellent ally. So while keeping an eye on him, we went to look for other friends. When he fought with the Golden Photon that night, we gave him a last chance. We gave him some power and opportunity to see how far he could go. The result, as Zither Jun saw, he died." General Zhang shook his head. "Since he died, it's fine. We didn't have any relationship with him, but at first we thought he was smart and could do great things if he was trained well. Since he wanted to die, we had no reason not to let him go. Until now, my master still needs an ally. It was a mistake to choose Li Yunxin. Now, it is not a mistake to choose Zither Jun, therefore," Zhang Jingzhong cupped his hands, "it is indeed worthy of the 4 words sincere cooperation. For this, we have already shown our sincerity." Speaking of this, he raised his hand and pointed to the south. Li Yunxin previously set up a big formation in the wilderness forest, which can transform the souls of the dead into the power of wish. We know that Zither Jun and Lord Tongtian also had such an arrangement, but Wanderer Bai, who was in charge of the formation, was killed by Li Yunxin. He did this in the hope that the two of you could only rely on him to digest the souls of the dead. Now that he is dead, we have already repaired the formation he left in the wilderness forest. If Zither Jun and Lord Tongtian still want the power of wish from the souls of the dead, then, we can use that formation." Zither Jun and Hatred were stunned when they heard this. Then Zither Jun raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "So, the souls of the dead were captured by your formation?" General Zhang smiled. "That's right. They have been refined in the formation. Whenever Zither Jun and Lord Tongtian want to enjoy them, we will offer them with both hands." "But you said just now you didn't do it?" General Zhang smiled again. "Indeed, I didn't do it. It was also not done by my fellows in the Li Kingdom. It was done by the 2 great shopkeepers of the Yi Kingdom and the Qin Kingdom. That's why they don't have the time. I'll be the one to talk to you." Hearing this, Zither Monarch turned to Hatred and smiled. "I see. Look, this General Zhang is eloquent and has a meticulous mind. It makes the 2 of us look stupid." Hatred also grinned. Exactly. It was a waste of talent for such an intelligent person to remain immortal. Why don't we give him eternal life?" The 2 great fiendish demons were joking, but their words were filled with an intense sense of danger. It was as though they were about to attack and kill Zhang Jingzhong in a blink of an eye. General Zhang smiled and said, "Zither Lady and Lord Tongt, please be patient. I have something else to say, please listen carefully. In the past," but the voice stopped abruptly. Hatred slammed his palm on the top of his skull, and his whole body immediately exploded into a pile of sticky flesh and blood. He was indeed a mortal who didn't practice Taoism. Since his physical body was destroyed, his remnant soul swayed and floated. Hatred clenched his fist again. This remnant soul was also scattered. Then he snorted, "You overestimate yourself. After we take down Cloud Mountain in a few days, we'll also wipe out this Munanju. But it's a pity for those 40 to 50,000 remnant souls." Zither Monarch smiled. "Forget it. Let's go down Cloud Mountain first. And then the remnant souls. Humph, Munanju is just SOSO. They really think we have to rely on Little White. We just need to keep a close eye on them. They get stolen again." Saying this, he looked down at his feet, "But it won't be enough for them." No one knew if he was looking at the Golden Horn Ho or something else. Hearing this, Hatred's expression turned cold. Then he said, "But young Dragon Master, it seems that the fake saint was seen through and the Xian men turned against each other. But they actually counterattacked just now. It seems that the Freemasonry has transferred back some of the people who were sent out. Now they have stabilized their position. In this case, We only need the remnant souls and the situation is still under control. But if we want to take down Cloud Mountain, I still want them all. Zither Monarch raised his eyebrows. Rest for a day and a night. Then press on and lure those Taoist priests over. After that, we should kill them all. Then we will go up Cloud Mountain. At that time, everything will be ours. Yazi nodded in agreement. So the huge golden horn Ho continued to move forward. On both sides of the ground were countless demon soldiers and generals. They could no longer see the ground, only muddy flesh and corpses. Actually, there was something else. Remnant souls. But ordinary people and demons would not open their eye for no reason. For example, at this moment, if someone opened their eyes, all they could see were countless remnant souls that had died miserably standing on the ground, and there were even living beings walking among them. Forget about knowing the way. If they looked down at their palms, they would see a bloody face. Who would give themselves this trouble? So even Zither Monarch and Hatred did not notice that there was actually a bold ghost standing on the head of the golden horn Ho, listening to their conversation. The ghost stood there for a long time as if it had wandered here aimlessly. In fact, it was not the only one nearby. There were many other wandering souls on the Ho. Fierce battles had taken place on this land, and it had even changed hands several times. The remnant souls had become so dense that even the wind could not pass through. If Zither Monarch and Hatred used any magical power to detect its existence, they could erase it with a wave of their hands. But they did not. The golden horn Ho was so huge that an elephant's height could only reach its knee. The two of them were conversing on this Ho and they were in their own camp. What they were talking about wasn't anything too secretive, so how could they be on high alert at all times? Therefore, these words and scenes were all heard by this ghostly thing without missing a single word. In fact, if one observed carefully, they would find that it was not a ghost but something different. But this place was a battlefield. Large amounts of remnant souls, resentment, and spiritual power were mixed together. Even a true realm master would find it difficult to form a formation, which showed how chaotic the chi was. Usually this difference would be noticed by others. But on this battlefield he could no longer sense anything. At this moment the wandering soul suddenly became agile. It turned around and jumped down. Squeezed by the other wandering souls, it quickly escaped. From here it went straight west. 60 li to the west was the remnant of the Tuotan Luan mountain. The terrain was relatively steep. A camp of demon soldiers was stationed here, guarding against enemy attacks from the side. Here there were much fewer humans and demons. But the wandering soul did not stop at this sentry post. It passed through a dense forest, a swamp, and a lake. Finally, it climbed to the top of a small mountain like a wisp of smoke, and landed in the palm of a person. This person was dressed in white and was half lying on the ground. With one arm supporting his head, he looked at the densely packed humans and demons on the horizon, and also at the slowly descending Yunshan. Seeing that the wandering soul had returned, he raised his hand and slapped it. The wandering soul turned into a piece of paper and fell to the ground. It turned out that it was drawn by a painting. He held the paper in his hand and saw that it was densely packed with the conversation between the three people. After reading it, he was stunned for a while, then slowly crushed the paper and scattered it. Then he sat up straight. His face was expressionless before, but now he was a little moved. Death Warrior. Li Yunxin sighed. The words recorded on this talisman, which he had just learned from the art saint study, made him realize that even Zither Lady and Yazi believed that he had indeed perished in both body and soul. But the people of Southwood House did not think so. Therefore, when the two demons asked about the whereabouts of the remnant soul, General Zhang only said that it was captured by their people. No one would have predicted that Li Yunxin would do this. However, Zither Master and Yazi had said that this was just a mortal. His expression did not change at all. He immediately gave a reasonable explanation to the two monsters, and then he was obliterated. He couldn't have thought that he would die, right? Thinking of this, Li Yunxin seemed to see the impassioned look of that person before he died. So he sighed again. Then he stood up. Now everyone thought he was dead. Originally, Zhang Jingzhong should have been aware of the inside story, but now he was also killed by Yazi. In this way, for a short period of time, he really disappeared from this world. So he decided to die again. About an hour later, Li Yunxin appeared behind a gentle slope. This slope was not a slope of earth, but a slope of corpses. It was formed by the bones of demons and cultivators. This place was northwest of the front line. It was originally a plain. The vanguard of the demon army was the first to reach here, but was attacked by the cultivators of Xianmen. The two sides fought fiercely here, but but there was no way to break through, so the front line slowly moved to the east, looking for a breakthrough. However, after a while, some high-level cultivators who were sent out by the fake sage suddenly came back to help, so the vanguard was thwarted and slowly retreated. This was the place where the demon army was closest to Cloud Mountain, about 100 miles away. Li Yunxin hid behind this gentle slope and looked up at the sky. In fact, he couldn't see the sky. The whole field of vision was occupied by Cloud Mountain. Here he could hear a loud roar, the sound of Cloud Mountain falling, the sound of air being compressed, and the sound of rocks falling outside the mountain. This sound was more deafening than the fiercest thunder. Even if he roared, people one step away would not be able to hear what he said. The walls of the mountain were densely packed with caves. Those were the places where the cultivators who couldn't fly were imprisoned. Lu Gongzan was imprisoned in one of these caves, and these caves were almost the same, so it was impossible for Li Yunxin to find out which cave he was in. However, at that time, Xan Shilio had the translucent jade slip that Li Yunxin gave her. The translucent jade slip contained the aura left by Li Yunxin, so he could roughly know the location of that thing. When he gave it to her, he had the same idea. Chapter 492. Therefore, he knew that Lu Gongzan had been imprisoned in the northwest of the periphery of Cloud Mountain. Now that the situation outside was like this, he must have been moved into the mountain. And at this moment, Li Yunxin could also sense where Lu Gongzan was in the mountain. Because Lu Gongzan had something that belonged to him. When he was far away, his aura was faint and he couldn't sense it. When he was close, he could sense it again. The translucent jade slip had determined the approximate location for him. And that little thing could help him find out which room Lu Gongzan was in. But there was another problem. When he was imprisoned by Su Yusong in the Xianmen army, he had heard him mention that there was an extremely tight defense outside the Xianmen. But this defense was not carried out by people. Instead, it was a huge array that had been operating for tens of thousands of years. Cultivators above the true state could cultivate the supernatural power of transforming their souls into their true bodies. If a cultivator in the periphery of Cloud Mountain used the method of transforming his soul into his true body, with a thought, his true body would appear in Cloud Mountain. Wouldn't that be a headache? This great array was designed to deal with such supernatural power. Even a cultivator at the peak of the profound realm couldn't be more than 100 miles away from his true body. Therefore, the range of this great array in Cloud Mountain was as wide as 100 miles. Even if an expert at the peak of the profound realm used his incarnation outside the array and wanted to invade, he could only stick to the outside of the mountain wall. If he wanted the incarnation to go further inside, he had to go with his true body to ensure that the incarnation wouldn't be destroyed. However, once both his true body and incarnation entered the restriction, it should be known that on the night after killing Jin Guangzi, Su Sheng had told Li Yunxin, the so-called divine soul into true body didn't really mean dividing a part of the soul. The incarnation was just a projection of one's meridians and orifices. When the true body died, if the meridians and orifices of the body were gone, the incarnation would have no projection to project and would be destroyed later. It was impossible for the true body to die and the incarnation to stay. Therefore, the true body and the incarnation were like two extremes. The two extremes entered the array at the same time, and the spiritual energy in the array immediately flowed, quickly forming a reciprocating passage between the two extremes. How strong was the spiritual energy in a formation that could cover the entire Cloud Mountain? Such powerful spiritual energy was circulating wildly between his real body and his projection. It wasn't something that anyone's snow mountain or sea of chi could withstand. It didn't matter that the incarnation was illusory. However, his real body would explode bit by bit and he would die a miserable death. Thus, the sturdy outer wall of the cloudy mountain prevented any possibility of breaking in by force. The restriction outside the outer wall prevented the possibility of the incarnation directly appearing in the Cloud Mountain. Therefore, for tens of thousands of years, those low-level cultivators could be locked outside the mountain without worrying that they would be rescued from the outside. Li Yunxin was more than 100 miles away from Cloud Mountain at the moment. In fact, some of the demons had tried this method when the demon army had charged here previously. They had split their spirit bodies outside the Cloud Mountains in an attempt to break in. However, none of the cultivators from the Mystic Gate paid attention to them. They just let the demons charge toward Cloud Mountain, and then watched them slowly explode into balls of blood in the air. At that time, Li Yunxin saw that scene with his own eyes. From this, he confirmed that the restriction did exist. And now he appeared here not because he had thought of some other method, but because he planned to do the same thing. The Cloud Mountain continued to fall, and the sound was like thunder. After another 15 minutes, Li Yunxin stood up. Then he shot into the sky and like a sharp arrow he shot straight toward Cloud Mountain. Between the Cloud Mountain and the ground was not an empty space. Instead, there was a thick layer of smoke and dust, huge falling rocks and lingering water vapor. But even so, even though his figure was hidden by these things, he was still seen by many cultivators from the Mystic Gate. Some had just retreated here, planning to rest and reorganize and guard Tongtian Swamp. The others were experts guarding the rear and their eyesight was better. But whether it was those low-level cultivators or experts, they only glanced at him and then looked away. In the past, it might be a new thing to see someone risking his life to rush to Cloud Mountain. But so many days had passed, so many people had died, and they had seen more stupid demons doing the same thing. Even the most hot-blooded cultivator in the realm of wills couldn't bring himself to do it. Everyone wanted to restore more Wacken as soon as possible to face the second round of attacks launched by demons. And the experts had other more troublesome things to do. These experts were all from the Freemasonry who came from everywhere later. The two fake sages came out of Cloud Mountain in advance, but they revealed their flaws, which led to the decadence of the battle again and again. Many cultivators from the Mystic Gate who should have died in the battle at the last moment left in advance. Now they, the wandering souls of the Freemasonry who had possessed the bodies of the head of masters and leaders, had to take over the work of those people and fight against the demons. How could this be? How could this be consuming the power of the Mystic Gate? It was obviously consuming the power of the Freemasonry. Therefore, Li Yunxin, who was not paid attention to by these people, rushed to 30 miles away from Cloud Mountain. 30 miles, when he was fighting with Fu Lifang in Dongting, he was in the realm of enlightened immortal, and the real body transformed by the spirit could be 30 miles away from the original body. Now he had reached the realm of advanced immortal, and he could be 50 or 60 miles away. He sensed that Lu Gongzan was in the mountain about 50 miles away from here. In the rumbling rain of stones, in the pervading steam, and in the deafening noises that seemed to never stop, Li Yunxin gritted her teeth and roared, "Go!" He transformed into his real body and appeared 50 miles away from Cloud Mountain. At the same time, he felt terrible pain. Wacken began to surge wildly into his body. It was as if countless steel awls were pouring into his body and began to pierce every meridian and acupoint of him. The pain not only came from the body but also from the deepest part of the soul. This level of pain finally made him understand why the great fiendish demons of MT Soaring Cloud had howled fiercely. The next moment, a layer of golden mist began to spread around his body. But it was not light, it was the golden dragon blood in his body. The more he moved forward, the faster his body collapsed. In just 3 seconds, the flesh and skin of his body, which had just been reborn for one night, began to peel off, blood splashed and bones shattered. He was about to be destroyed again. Some cultivators on the ground occasionally looked up and witnessed this process. They could not see clearly, but they could only see a human figure disintegrating and dispersing quickly. They all knew that it was a big demon. However, after the figure finally burst into a thick cloud of fire, they retracted their gaze. It was just another idiot who had died. Lu Gongzan was in a stone room at the moment. There was still no chain on his body, so he just fell to the ground. Lying on his side, he could see the swordsman outside the door with his blank eyes. Now his face was covered in bloody scars. Some of them were injured by the swordsman's scabbard on the stone path. The other part was some ulcers. His body was so weak that it was on the verge of collapse. Because of the terrible inflammation on his right arm and because he had not eaten for a long time, the vitality in his body had reached the point where it was about to end. But he did not know what made him hold back his breath so that he could survive. The swordsman stared at him with disgust for a while outside the cell door and said again, "I know that look in your eyes. It's because your body is in extreme pain, and you want to end this pain as soon as possible, but you can't do it. So you look at me, you want to die, don't you?" He sneered and shook his head. "I won't let you die. Do you know? Last night, my sect leader died in battle." A perfected Taoist who had cultivated for more than 300 years died in the hands of demons. Sect leader treated me. Bah. He gritted his teeth and spat into the room. "You are a scum among people, associating with demons. If you were fine now, I would immediately kill you to avenge sect leader. But now that you are in so much pain, I won't kill you, I won't let you do what you want, I will let you experience the feeling of living a life worse than death." Bah. But that Lao Dao did not say anything. He just lay on the ground and opened his mouth subconsciously, like a fish that had jumped onto the shore. The swordsman frowned again and cursed in a low voice, "You deserve this." But after saying this, he suddenly felt a cold breeze blow past him. Then he seemed to see a shadow pass by. But now they were in the dungeon. Although the stone path was wide, it was extremely dark. This dungeon had not been locked up for a long time, and there was not much spiritual energy left in the Chongming talisman, so the light was slightly flickering. So, he did not take it to heart. This place was the inner part of Cloud Mountain. It was at least 20 miles away from the outside. He heaved a sigh of relief and suppressed the restlessness in his heart. Then he turned to look at the dungeon. Then, like a statue, he stood rooted to the ground. In the dungeon, a blurry figure was slowly taking shape. At first, he thought that Lao Dao had died and he did not know how. He opened his inner eye so he saw the remnant of his soul. But as soon as this thought appeared in his mind, he realized that it was not a remnant of his soul. It was just a transparent silhouette. He could see that the silhouette bent down in front of Lu Gongzan and touched his right arm. Then, he saw that the terrible wound on Lu Gongzan's right arm was torn open by the silhouette. There was originally a wound on his forearm, but many festering cracks spread out from that wound to his upper and lower body. Now that the wound on his forearm was torn open, what was inside was revealed. It was a palm-sized scale. The transparent silhouette picked up the scale and pressed it on his chest. Like a halo, the silhouette turned from transparent to solid. In the end, it turned into a handsome, devilishly charming man dressed in white. He tilted his head and glanced at the swordsman. He bent down and held Lu Gongzan in his arms as he said softly, "If that's the case, I'll send you to see your sect leader, okay?" Chapter 493. Such a low voice reached the sword cultivator's ears in the dark stone path. But the sword cultivator didn't move at all. It wasn't because he was scared out of his wits, but it was precisely because his brain felt as if thousands of needles were stabbing into it at the same time. Cold sweat seeped down his spine like rain, and every muscle in his body was so tense that it was about to snap. But he still didn't move. Because she had already realized that this white-robed, beautiful, calm man exuded a towering evil aura, was the Dragon Nine Cheese Kiss, the Wei River Dragon King and Li Yunxin. But wasn't he already dead? This sentence turned crazily in his mind. He silently shouted it hundreds of times, but he still didn't dare to move. Such a cruel demon could come back to life under the eyes of all the cultivators in the world. The demon was less than 2 feet away from him. How could he dare to move? How could he dare to run? So he continued to stand still, looking at Li Yunxin. First, he tore the Taoist robe on Lu Gongzan's right arm and threw it aside. Then he said lightly, "If you dare to run, I will tear you apart." The swordsman immediately nodded crazily. He didn't care if Li Yunxin could see him or not. Li Yunxin stretched out his hand and pressed the wound on Lu Gongzan's right arm back. When he showed up, Lu Gongzan was already unconscious. Now that he was being tortured like this, he only let out a low groan and kept his eyes closed. His right arm was no longer swollen. But the crisscrossing cracks were still there and blood was oozing out. Looking at it, it looked just like scales. So Li Yunxin frowned slightly and used his finger to poke his arm a few times. His silver teeth moved, and he bit the tip of his tongue and spat a mouthful of blood on his arm. How could his blood be ordinary blood? Even gold and stone would be corroded by it. But when it sprayed on Lu Gongzan's arm, it only gave off a faint green smoke. Then, the crisscrossing wounds on his arm began to shrink, and the skin in between became hard and swollen. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. In just 2 breaths of time, the green smoke dissipated and the wound on his arm disappeared. But the crisscrossing marks were still there. However, it was no longer a crack. Instead, it was the gap between the scarlet scales. Lu Gongzan's entire arm was covered in scales. At this time, Li Yunxin asked again, "Do you have any medicinal pills?" The sword Xiao knew that she was asking him. He wanted to reply, yes, but he found that his throat and tongue were as hard as iron, so he couldn't say a word. At that moment he could only frantically search his body. After finding a few items, he lifted his leg and was about to walk over to deliver them. However, it was as if his legs were filled with lead. He only took 1 step before falling to the ground, causing the small jade bottles to fall into the cell door. Li Yunxin stretched out his hand and grabbed at the ground. He didn't care what kind of medicinal pills they were. He pulled out all of them and poured them all down Lu Gongzan's throat. He then pressed hard on his chest, and made him swallow all of them. Seeing this, the sword Xiao became anxious. He could finally speak, "You can't do this, you can't do this. The medicinal effects will clash and he will die. It wasn't that he felt sorry for Lu Gongzan. Instead, he was afraid that these medicinal pills would kill him, and the demon would become violent and vent its anger on him. But Li Yunxin didn't care about him. Instead, he used his palm strength and fiercely hit Lu Gongzan's chest. Lu Gongzan immediately let out a choking sound, and woke up. When he woke up and opened his eyes, he saw Li Yunxin. He was stunned for a while, and then his lips trembled. "Brother X and am I dreaming?" Li Yunxin smiled gently and then helped him sit on the ground. "No." Lu Gongzan stared at Li Yunxin for a while and said as if he was sleepwalking, "I heard that your body and soul were destroyed in front of the formation." Li Yunxin turned his face and glanced at the sword Xiu. The sword Xiu was sitting on the ground, paralyzed. Seeing Li Yunxin's gaze, he hurriedly shouted, It's all nonsense. I heard it from someone else, But Li Yunxin only said, "I want to talk to him and I don't want others to hear it." The sword Xiu was stunned for a while and blinked his eyes in disbelief. He turned his face to the side. Then I don't want you to leave my sight," Li Yunxin said coldly and stared at him without blinking. The sword Xiu was stunned again and his mouth was half open in a daze. After a breath's time, Li Yunxin raised his eyebrows. "Since you're so stupid, why don't you just die?" But as soon as he finished speaking, the sword Xiu turned his hand and pulled the hairpin out of his head. He closed his eyes and gritted his teeth, left, right, and in an instant 2 streaks of blood spurted out. He had actually pierced his ears and made him deaf. Li Yunxin smiled coldly, "At least you're not stupid." Then he turned his face to look at Lu Gongzan, and his expression softened and he said seriously, "I'll tell you something." He also sat down cross-legged in front of Lu Gongzan and looked at him. "I did die in front of the 2 armies. The one who died was indeed my original body. As for how I didn't die, I'll tell you." Lu Gongzan's lips moved. But Li Yunxin raised a finger to his lips and looked at him seriously. "Listen." The old Taoist was stunned. Then, he stopped talking and only listened carefully. "When I was in the city of Wei, I used the city of Wei as a formation, and gathered the power of wish and yang qi just to draw another me. You know, after a person dies, his body is destroyed and his spirit is damaged, so what is left is a remnant soul. Although it looks like my former self, my mind is not complete. Just like those ghost cultivators, they have obsessions. Obsessions are a terrible flaw. Once they are controlled, it is equivalent to being held in the hands of others. So many cultivators would rather have their body and soul destroyed than become ghost cultivators. I don't want to fall into this situation. So, I used the formation in the city of Wei to ensure that my mind is not destroyed." Li Yunxin said to Lu Gongzan seriously and carefully, "Then I used this spirit that is no different from me to attach to the reverse scale left by Qi Wen, took over his body and replaced him as Long Jiu. That was how I lived in the city of Wei. But later this method was seen through by the Freemasonry. In fact, I didn't want to hide it for too long. This method was not difficult, but no one had done it before, so no one could have thought of it. Now that I did it, no matter how well I hid it, it would be found out sooner or later. Since it would be found out sooner or later, it would be better for me to maximize its value before that. So I deliberately left a large formation in the wilderness forest that could draw my spirit. But I never thought of using this formation. It was big but not big enough. In the end, it was still discovered by the Freemasonry. When they found this, they thought they had found my trump card, which was the result I wanted. Then, everyone thought I had no way out. My original body was planted with a restriction, and the large formation for resurrection was also exposed. After that, I disguised myself for a long time, just to dispel any suspicion of anyone, to make them believe that I was really at the end of my road. But when you and I were in the Ziwei Palace in Dongting and were bombarded by the heavenly thunder of several sects, you should still remember. I used the Dragon Palace to escape, and the Dragon Palace naturally stayed where it was. That Ming Jinzi didn't notice a small copper nail, so I hid it in the soil. Then I led the flood dragon in the lake to lure them away, and I came back to kill them. They thought we were arguing and I told you to go, but you didn't go. But in fact, you threw the palace in the soil to me and I threw a scale to you. So I got the Dragon Palace back and things were easy." Li Yunxin let out a sigh of relief. "In front of the 2 armies, I drove the copper nail into the ground. Then I left my real body in the Dragon Palace. One of them was the other scale that I had left behind. By the death of my original body. At the moment of my death, there was another emptiness in the world. And when the original body died, the incarnation would exist for a very short period of time as a projection of the original body. Thus, my avatar immediately attached itself to that scale, and another one of me was born. Since it was my soul incarnation, it naturally had a consciousness, unlike those remnant souls. This was why I survived even though my body and soul were destroyed in front of the array. Then I came to this cloud mountain. First, I sacrificed my incarnation inside the cloud mountain, and then my true self came to the cloud mountain. The great formation outside the mountain then destroyed my new true self and spirit. Then, my incarnation came to you again, obtained this scale from you and reconstructed the third true self. When Li Yunxin said this, he paused and looked at Lu Gongzan. The me in front of you is already the third me. In these 2 days I happened to die twice. When he said this, he shook his head and laughed at himself. But like I said to you before in the city of Wei, a man should be more ruthless to himself. Am I right? He laughed like this, but Lu Gongzan didn't laugh. He stared at Li Yunxin and listened to his most private things. His lips trembled again and he squeezed out a hoarse voice from his throat. Brother Xen, well, why do you say all these things? Li Yunxin lowered his eyes. After a moment of silence, he looked at him again and said calmly, you know, I don't like to talk about things in my heart. He thought for a while and smiled. Anyway, I don't like to reveal my true feelings to each other. Lu Gongzan. It was the first time he saw him smile like this. He looked like a shy child. Li Yunxin smiled like this, then shook his head and restrained his expression. He looked at Lu Gongzan solemnly again. So I told you these things. From now on, there are no more secrets between us. In this dim stone prison, the two sat facing each other. Inside Cloud Mountain there was a chaotic atmosphere. Outside Cloud Mountain there was a bloody massacre. But in this small and quiet stone room, one of the masterminds behind all this, Wei River Dragon King Li Yunxin, and Lu Gongzan sat facing each other in silence, looking at each other. Lao Dao shut his mouth tightly, his chest slightly rising and falling. After another 3 breaths, his throat moved as if he had swallowed something. I understand, he said, Brother Xen, I understand. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.